Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Epic Marvel Podcast YouTube channel. We have a great show for you today. And of course, you're here because it is the 10th anniversary of Marvel's Epic Collection. If you can believe it, 10 years that Marvel started this whole thing going back 2013 when they released, gonna bring them down here, when they released this book here, Iron Man, The Enemy Within. And it was a collection like no other. It was a paperback, 500 pages or so of stuff that hadn't been reprinted before. It was just it was really, really neat to see. And the best part was that they were promising, and this is kind of hard to believe for a publishing house of any kind, promising that they would be reprinting an unbroken run of all of these titles, Thor and Spider-Man, from start to finish, just like unreal. So yeah, 10 years have passed, and we're going to talk about the Epic collections. We're gonna talk about what makes them so great. I have some special guests lined up here. In fact, I'm going to throw up the schedule so you can see. In a second, we're going to welcome Omar. Oh, this is the wrong schedule. Hold on. Pay no attention to this. Uh, I redid the schedule. I forgot to upload the right picture. But we're going to invite Omar in a second here to talk with us about Epic Collections. And then at 7:30, we have Alex Lear, and we're going to unbox a couple of upcoming Epic Collections that you haven't seen yet. And then we're going at 8:30, we're going to talk to Mike Hansen, who has been involved with the Star Wars Epic Collections. And then at 9 o'clock, we're going to talk to Mark Beasley, who was one of the collection editors way back at the start for a number of years, and hear about some of the origins of Epic Collections and such. The chat is open, and I thank you everybody for being here. I see some of the people who are my friends from the Facebook group, and it's great to see everybody here. Let's get started here. I'm going to invite my good buddy Omar to the stage. Here we are. Omar, nice to see you.
I am actually glad that you waited a second because I was having some camera problems. So, happy birthday, Marvel Epic, Marvel Epics. Yes, 10 years. My gosh, dude, time just flies.
10 years. I
That's
know, right? And if you were you there at the very beginning with the Epic Collections? Did you buy the first couple of there you go. You've got the very first one there.
yes. I remember when I used to frequent the Marvel Masterworks forum. They were talking about it, and I had seen it announced. It was everywhere. I think it was still when Newsarama was Newsarama, and I mean, even places like Bleeding Cool, was it Lying in the Gutter? I can't remember what it was called back then, but they were all talking about how this thing was going to revolutionize collected editions. And yeah, I remember picking up the first one because they announced 4 at first, and then they expanded it to 6, and I was like, cool, we're only going to get 6. That means they're going to be done probably in about 7 or 8 years for each of the lines. And oh my gosh, look where we are now.
We're a little far off from that still. Well, we're getting very, very close because Captain America, once we get
Yeah.
past the ones that we have announced for 2024, there are only 3 remaining to cover the period from the beginning of Captain America all the way to Heroes Reborn.
Mhm.
That is still pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and okay, so really, really interesting, like how it all began and what we were told, and how things have changed, right? Not just
Mhm.
in the scale, but also in the number of lines, and also that these are not mapped around omnis anymore, which was the original idea, the original intent. But now it's like, oh yeah, we're just epics have their own followers, so we're just gonna map these accordingly to however we see them fit. And yeah, and this was one of the smartest things to do, remember, was put this out. And this is the stuff that's not collected in the omnibus. So people like me that are omnibus collectors are like, oh, I'll just get this and use it as a placeholder. And here in about 3 years' time, whenever we get a volume 2 of that Iron Man run, I can just replace this. And 10
Yeah,
years
so
later,
that Iron Man book, it followed the Michelini and Layton
mhm,
omnibus.
yeah.
And it's the Denny O'Neil run. and there are two epics for this one. The third one still hasn't come out yet, but it's like you were just waiting for a Denny O'Neil Iron Man omnibus, and it hasn't come yet 10 years later.
And here
So
we
for
are. Yeah.
quickly for everybody who may be stumbling upon this, maybe in the future or so, what is Marvel's Epic Collection? If you could sum it up in just a couple of sentences, what is it?
It is a collection of stories told in chronological order, but not published. They don't come out in chronological order, and they go anywhere from well, I guess not modern now, but anywhere from like 80s to 70s to the very beginning in the Silver Age. I don't think we've seen anything collected from the Golden Age. So why would you ask me to
Not yet.
describe this? And you know I am a man of many words, and I can't. Okay, pretty books, collecting lots of pretty stories from Marvel in color, not in black and white. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and promising an unbroken run. And so some of these lines, like
Mhm.
Spider-Man, they have like over 20 lines. I think the highest number is 27 with the Clone Saga volume that's coming out in January.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's really cool how far they've come and how they've made, they're kind of their own thing now. They're their own, it's part of the Marvel brand, right? Like we've got the omnibus editions and now people have the Epic collections. And when people say the Epic collections, they know that they're talking about these really thick trade paperbacks collecting 20 to 25 issues of an unbroken run, like you said. And I think that's wonderful, right? Because I guess if you're a little bit older, you may remember the actual Epic line from Marvel Comics. Such books as
That's right.
Akira was printed on there, but so it's cool that they
And
took that
Gru.
name. Yes, yes, it's cool that they took that name and added it to this. So what
Exactly.
was your
So
first Epic?
my first epic, I got it right here, actually. I knew someone was going to ask. This one right here, Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, the classic Steve Ditko era, Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, the very beginning of Spider-Man. My sister got this for me for my birthday, and because I told her that I saw some of these advertised, I'm like, that's kind of a neat idea. I wouldn't mind trying it out, and instantly hooked, instantly hooked, and so started buying the rest of them. Thankfully, at that time, there were only like 15 of them out at the time. So I was able to go back and fill in that back catalog pretty quick. And then after that, it was just a matter of keeping up to date with the releases. And so, yeah, this is the first one that I got. What was the first one that you got, Omar?
Oh, I wasn't kidding. This one.
You were right from the very beginning.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
you go.
I didn't get it day of, right? Because I was ordering my stuff from in stock trades at the time. So I knew I wanted this one. And like I said, I was going to collect them as placeholders. And what's funny is, so when they announced the first 4 lines, I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do, I can do, what was it? Thor? Was it Thor? Captain
Here,
America?
I'll show you the ad. The first ad. This is it right
Yes.
here.
Okay.
This is the ad that they launched with.
Okay. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do Thor in Epic Collection and Spider-Man and Iron Man and Avengers, sure. And then they added 2 more, right? And one of them was, I believe, X-Men
No, it
was
was Fantastic Four and Captain America
Captain
came
America.
next.
Yeah. So when they expanded it to 6, I said, okay, 6 isn't too bad. I can do 6. And they said that's it, right? Like they were like, this is what we're going to focus on. We're going to make sure these lines end, and then we'll start spamming spanning out to other series.
It wasn't long
And
before that they added Daredevil,
oh
and
my
then
gosh.
Moon Knight, and X-Men, Silver Surfer, Hulk came quickly after that.
Oh,
And even at that, I'm like, okay, it's a little getting a little much. The cover price was cheaper still, and in Canada you could still get some discounts on Amazon. And I'm like, I can handle 6, 7, 8, yet 9 lines, okay. But it's definitely ballooned beyond that, hasn't it?
uh,
Um,
that is the proper term. Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting to go back and see how things used to be and how, I remember being told not everything can be an Epic collection. and now we have modern epic lines, which is just so crazy, right? Like they've done away with
Yeah.
the complete collections, and they're moving those towards the Marvel modern epic lines. So it's been an amazing ride. I love it, man. You know, I love collected editions, and I'm not one that frowns upon anything that's in trade paperback. I just like the idea of people reading, and if people ever want the chance to go back and read something from the very beginning, now they do, with the exception of Golden Age stuff, right? Because we don't have. I I want to say you would probably know off the top of your head. Was there a collection that had some Golden Age stuff in epic format, like something that reprinted, you know, that was previously released?
I think just for one of the anniversary issues of Captain America, I think they reprinted some Golden Age story or so, but nothing extensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's really cool to be able to do that. And I saw a comment earlier. Why don't they publish these in chronological order? And I think both Kurtis and I, and anybody in the chat that has been around for a while, can probably answer that. And the simple answer is just because they want these to sell. Anytime you try to start a collection with a volume 1 of the Silver Age, you're going to have modern readers be turned off. Not all of them, of course, but most of them turned off by the art, the wordy dialogue, and they're like, I'll just wait till you get to volume 10, you know, and Bronze Age or 80s. But they don't make it that far because they don't sell. So what they decided to do was print something from 80s and then go back and print something from the 60s. And it kind of makes you want to catch them all, right? It like the Pokemon, like I'm still waiting to replace this trade paperback, Kurtis. Like this would be volume 9. I still have this because I'm waiting for volume 9 of the Epic collections. It's really cool to see that, and that's why they did it that way. And why do you think they did? Why do you think they didn't do it in chronological order?
Well, I think for the same reason. We've seen time and time again a lot of initiatives to reprint everything, and they always start from the beginning. Of course, most successful has been the Marvel Masterworks,
Yes.
but the Essentials, they dwindle out. DC had the thing called the Chronicles, like Superman Chronicles, Batman Chronicles. When you start from the very beginning, like you said, it's got a very small window. But if you're able to jump around to everywhere, then you can pick up readers from all eras, and that's been really great. Another thing that I really love from the going out of order thing is that we don't know what's coming out next.
Yeah,
if they were all going in order, it'd be like, okay, well, I know next year is going to be volume 2, but that's what I'm having you as a special guest, because we've done epic announcements consistently over the past like maybe 4 or 5 years now, I think.
It's been a while.
And yeah, every 3 or 4 months, Marvel sends you a list of the epics that are coming out, and we make an event out of it. We have a live stream on your YouTube channel, by the way. That's near mint condition on YouTube.
I suck at plugging myself, but thank you for that.
And it's been great. It's been so much fun to be able to guess what's coming out, and to have the community, the fan community that's built around this, also guess what's coming out, and see what actually Marvel has planned. And a lot of people are excited. Some people are disappointed by it. It's like, oh man, when are they? They didn't include Amazing Spider-Man Volume 16 again. Come on,
it is
that
wonderful
kind of thing. And it's
to be in the middle and see how things change too, like what people want, right? Because much like when I announce Omnis, as soon as I announce something within a few seconds, it's like, oh yeah, well, where's this? Right? Because there's always that mentality of like, okay, I've been excited for this for 5 years and it's finally coming. Yeah, but whatever. What's next? Right? When are they going to do this? And it feels like that happens with Epic collections too. Like no matter what, something always changes, whether we're announcing Spider-Man 6, Spider-Man 26, and now the cursed Spider-Man 16. And speaking of cursed and volumes, that was probably one of the most brilliant things they did, was add the volume number in the back of the books. That at first, I want to say retailers hated that idea. Retailers were like, why are you putting a volume number on the back? They didn't understand the concept behind that because they're so used to putting volume numbers on the spine of the book. But I feel like putting it on the back was such a brilliant move because you don't have to catch them all. You can just get the stories that you liked, or the stories that you enjoyed in your youth, or whatever nostalgia,
They
or
could be
even stories you
placeholders,
wonder about. What's that?
or they can be placeholders in between your omnis or whatever, and it doesn't look weird just being a, 17, volume 17 randomly in there.
Right. Yeah. And even though you're missing some and you're waiting for reprints, it doesn't look like that on your shelf. You don't have like numbers like Curtis just said. You don't have an 18 or a volume 2 or a volume 3 just sticking out waiting for that volume 1 or volume 5. I think that was probably the most brilliant move that they've done, and it's got to be like top 3 most brilliant moves in collected editions, because we've also seen that borrowed elsewhere. They're starting to do it in omnis now, like the Ed Brubaker omnibus collections now have a number on the back. This is Ed Brubaker volume 3 of his series out of 5. Or we've seen them in the Flash collections. They put the number on the back, no longer on the spine. So obviously somebody took note of that and decided to kind of flattery, right?
Yeah. The
Borrow.
Carl Barks library does the same thing. They don't put the numbers on the spines at all, but they do put this is volume, 1 of 30 or whatever on the inside.
Well, yes, it was impossible to find at first. They didn't start. Remember, now they put him on the back, which is smarter to do. Like on the last page, right?
Do they
right
do that now? Yeah.
Right before you get to the end sheet is where they're like, "This is volume blah 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 out of whatever." Yeah.
Okay, Omar, I have a couple of things I want to show you.
Show me.
This stuff is going to be in the January catalog that we're going to talk about in next week, I think, on your channel. These are some new covers that Penguin Random House put up these covers on their website. These are epic collections that are coming out in March. And what do you think of these volumes?
Okay, so we have more DeFalco on the Fantastic Four. Yes, one of the most underrated runs ever on the FF.
And this is actually going to complete. This is going to complete the run of DeFalco in Epic Collections. We're going to have the complete run.
Now that cover was also, what was it? It was a chromium cover too that they're using, the Paul Ryan cover there.
Right. I don't think that it's. I'm not sure if it had a regular edition or not, or if it was just the fancy one. This is the issue 400 cover, and it was all like silver and stuff, and so it looks like we've got some new coloring that we've never had before on that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay, so the monster inside is this is the Mackie era, right, of Carnage, the miniseries. Is that what it is? Oh, and the Peter Milligan stuff. Yeah, that stuff is okay. Carnage is my favorite symbiote. But I like my Carnage like mid 90s. That was my favorite era. So like the Bagley and Nicolini stuff.
And then is kind of a grab bag. This is a grab bag of stuff. It actually the material goes all the way to 2008, so it stretches from the mid 90s to 2008.
Which is crazy if you know what happens to the character, right? I'm not gonna spoil it, but something big happens to the character. Oh wait, that would have that. Never mind. I'll just say something big happens to the character in between those years. I don't want to spoil where it even takes place, because I just want people to be surprised. I'm wondering if they'll include like material from that stuff.
I don't know, maybe.
Now,
and then the Wolverine volume.
I want to say the Wolverine volume is the last one out of that era before the relaunch with Greg Rucka, if I'm not mistaken. Because you have Frank Terry wrapped up that series, and Daniel Way did a couple of fill-in issues too. And because I think this one has annuals 2000 and 2001. So I'm trying to think. Do you remember what's collected in this one? If it's Frank Terry, I assume it's
Wolverine 159 to 172, and it does have annual 2000 and 2001.
Okay, so if it's going to 172, then we need another one. Because Wolverine did not end at 172. But I was thinking with Frank Terry's name, I thought this was the last one. Shows how much I pay attention whenever we announce these books, or maybe we just didn't talk.
We actually didn't announce this one. This is one that
Oh,
Marvel
okay.
added
So
to the schedule after our announcements.
so it's not on me. It's not on me. Okay, because Wolverine went
Yeah.
all the way to 189. So I was gonna say that it would need one more volume, and then after 189 is when they relaunched the series for Greg Rucka's run. But yeah,
Right.
Daniel Way ended up finishing out the series.
Okay, so one more volume before they switch it over to modern era epics. And
Maybe.
speaking of modern era epics, I've got 3 more covers here. These ones were released on Penguin Random House's website as well. I want to thank Phil on the Facebook group for finding these and passing them along. Astonishing X-Men is another one that we didn't announce.
I could have sworn we announced that one, or it was. I'm okay. No, I think what happened is I told you it was coming,
Yeah,
but
we weren't
but
allowed
we
to
didn't.
announce it at the
But
time.
we weren't allowed to say anything. Yeah. Okay. Now that is a modern epic era, right? Yeah, modern epic.
These are all
All these
modern era. Astonishing X-Men is collecting only the first 12 issues of the series. So it's going to be a thin epic collection, but I think it's because they want to try and make the breaking points the actual story arcs. I think. I mean,
I'm
I
just.
think they could.
What does it say? What volume it is? Astonishing modern.
It's
Oh no, because
volume
they're
one.
okay. Because they're also doing modern new X-Men, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah, New X-Men Volume
Yeah.
1 is going to come up in a little while. So this is Astonishing X-Men Modern Era Epic Collection Volume 1.
Okay. Yeah, so that's really
And,
interesting
yeah.
because they're not breaking up uncanny and adjectiveless. But I
Mm.
think you would anyway, we could talk about this another day. I keep meaning to do another episode with you about just how the mapping is going to go and how it's going to change. But we did announce the other two. I think we had different covers
Yes.
though.
We had different covers for both of these. Yeah, you're right. So they've changed the covers. This is Daredevil Modern Era Epic Collection Volume 2 Underboss, which is the beginning, I believe is the beginning of the Brian Michael Bendis run, right?
Yes, this takes place after the Actually, this should have some Bob Gale stuff in it.
Yeah. It'll also have Daredevil Ninja miniseries, the 3-issue miniseries. So
Which
it'll
for you
have stuff that wasn't in the Brian Michael Bendis Omnis.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, yes, for you fine folks that collect only Omnis, Daredevil Ninja was not collected in that. Neither was Daredevil, what was it, Last Day? End of Days. So they might collect
Isn't
it
that a
in
more modern
it takes
story?
place.
Or is that?
It took place after his run. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then on the third one here on the left is Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider Modern Era Epic Collection. That's a mouthful, that title there. This is volume 2, Weapon of Choice, and it picks up right after the first volume, which is already out. And this one is collecting Spider-Gwen 9 through 24, and also Annual 1, and the all-new Wolverine Annual number 1, and Spider-Man 12 to 14. She has a crossover.
Yeah,
I
it's that
liked the first
crossover.
volume. I like the first Epic collection a lot. I thought I had a lot of fun. I'm only familiar with Spider-Gwen from the movies, so it was nice to dip into the comics and experience this character kind of for the first time. And I liked it a lot.
Oh man, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I was a fan of it too. I
Awesome.
really liked it. So it surprised me how much I liked it because whenever you're talking about clones or alternate realities, you can go either way. Sometimes I care, and then sometimes yeah, not for me.
Okay, Omar, if you could pick a favorite Epic collection, what would it be? Do you have I asked you for a top 3, but maybe just narrow. We only have a couple minutes left on our little chat
Okay,
here before we welcome our next guest.
so you did ask me for a top 3, and I thought all new X Factor. So that is the beginning of Peter David's run. I really love that just because the change up is so awesome. And we didn't have that stuff in Omnibus collection. So I'm ignoring the fact that some of the stuff has been collected in Omnibus format. But yeah, there's a soft spot in my heart for Iron Man, the Enemy Within, the one that started it all, because it's it's the follow up to the Omnibus, and that Omnibus hasn't come out yet. And then the
It's a good
upcoming,
volume.
and it is a good volume. You're right, because
It's a great
this
volume.
is you still have Dennis O'Neil on the run, and it's got some phenomenal artwork in there. And
Yeah,
then
Luke McDonald.
the third one definitely has to be the upcoming unannounced New Warriors Epic Collection Volume 1, which is coming one day. I promise you. I am not making that up. Honestly, I have to go with oh my gosh, it's that one-off book. And of course, I didn't write it down. Killraven. That's it.
Killraven.
Just because it's
Nice.
one and done, I don't think that book will ever get an oversized hardcover collection. I don't think that book will ever get an omnibus edition. I don't know if he'll get a masterwork or not. It's an all one and done. And I also don't know if people miss out on it, how much the demand there will be for a reprint of a book like that. It's got some great artwork in there too. Yeah. So I got to go with those. Those are my 3 favorite ones. But am I kidding about New Warriors? That will come. I promise. We were supposed to announce it 2 years ago, Kurtis. Such is life.
Well, and then they decided to do the Omnis, I guess, instead.
Which, you know what? That was a win-win for this guy. But I'm pretty sure those will come. Just like everything from, I'm sure we'll get epic collections of Captain Marvel. I'm sure we'll get epic collections of, oh no, wait, we do have those. Yeah. There's not a lot. Wait, before I go, what hasn't been collected from that Silver Age? I mean, we got Namor. We need Adam Warlock, Captain Marvel.
Yeah, so we need Captain Marvel is the big standout, I think,
there is
as well as
Killraven
Nick
Masterworks.
Fury.
Sorry about that. There is. Thank you all.
Yes.
I gave up on Masterworks a long time ago.
There we go. We have we need Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. in Epic Collection. That's kind of the big missing one. And also the Thing stories, the Thing Human Torch stories from Strange Tales. It had a complete collection, but it hasn't been epicked. Yeah, and we could get Inhumans as well. That could be a good one from that era also. So there's still some room, and I suspect that as these longer titles wrap up, or maybe as some of the shorter titles wrap up as well, because a bunch of these are coming up toward the end now, that they will start to introduce these other titles that they've probably been holding off just so that they have some nice content from this era to replace these titles that are disappearing.
Yeah, and then on top of that, we have all those modern epic collections too.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's kind of unlimited, and then they'll just keep on pumping out the reprints, I hope, as well.
I'm sure I'm sure those will keep coming. If people keep, I mean, as long as there's people being introduced to this wonderful, collected editions line, then I'm sure more will come. What's one that you want to see in our next announcement, Kurtis? That's something that will be my last question to you. What's the one epic you want to see in the next set of announcements, the next round, which should be coming up here in the next month or so?
I guess so. I actually really want to see the Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Epic Collection started. I would love I love those Stranko issues. I have those old complete collections, but to have the Kirby and Stranko stuff all in one volume, I think would be really awesome. So that's out of stuff that's like not announced, like lines that don't exist yet. That's what I would pick. Otherwise, I just want them to continue on Generation X.
Well, they're almost done with that, man. Unless they do a modern era, right? A modern Generation X.
One and done. Yeah.
Yeah, it would.
Okay, so plug your YouTube channel for me, and our time is up. Actually, that half hour flew by pretty quick.
It did. It always does. Near Me Condition is my channel. I hang out with Kurtis. I'll be with Kurtis next Thursday, live at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for having me, brother. Love you. Love everybody in the community. Keep on reading.
See you later. Okay, that was our first guest, and it's always a pleasure to have Omar on my show. Actually, this is the first time I've had him on my show. I'm on his show a lot, and it's always a pleasure to be on his show. And I will be on his show, like he said, next Thursday. But my next guest I'm going to bring on is somebody that I know from our Facebook group and from the Masterworks forum. This is Alex Lear.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. It's your alter ego. This is
What's
not
that?
Alice. No, there you. Okay. So I think if anyone is wondering who your favorite Marvel superhero is, I think we can guess
It's
pretty
actually Alf.
definitively. It's Alf. Yeah.
I noticed you got Alf
I've got
back
mine
there
back
too.
here too.
Yeah, I collected that from number 2 onward. No, no, Hulk is definitely has always been my favorite. Spider-Man's a close second. So yeah, this is not an original
Awesome.
shirt from the '60s. Got it about 40 years later. I wore it to the very first Hulk movie in '03. That was just made me cringe a little bit, but each movie's gotten better.
Okay, I've got a funny story. I've got a funny Hulk movie story. When that movie came out, my cousin got tickets to like a pre-screening show
Yeah,
he got it from a radio station, and so the radio station,
there we go.
the radio DJs were there at the show, kind of ramping up the crowd beforehand,
Yeah,
and they got someone. They wanted people to come down and win some prizes and stuff like that. So they said, "Does anyone want to sing?" They said, "We know Hulk doesn't have a theme song, so does anyone want to sing the Spider-Man theme song?" And someone put up their hand and went down and sung the Spider-Man theme song. And then I leaned over to my cousin. I said, "Hulk does have a theme song from the '60s."
yeah.
And then so once that song was over, my cousin stood up and he yelled, "Hulk does have a theme song, and he knows it." So then
It's
they
a
got
fun
me to come up. They got me to come up on stage and sing Doc Bruce
banner.
Banner, belted by
The
gamma
gamma
rays,
rays
turns
turns
into
into
the
the
Hulk.
Hulk. Ain't he on glamour
To
rays?
the
I
ice.
mean, yeah, it's a tough one. It makes me wince
So
too.
I got an Incredible Hulk mouse pad that
Okay.
had the movie poster with Eric Bana
Yeah.
and the Hulk on it, and I still use it. It's actually downstairs on my kid's computer downstairs. But so there you go. That's my Hulk story.
We all have one.
um,
Yeah.
so I see you have a big collection of Epic collections in the back behind you there.
Yeah. I I've grown. I ran out of room in my office, so I've kind of like branched out into the house. I'm lucky. I'm lucky my wife tolerates it. But yeah, these things have. I think I mentioned once. These things are like tribbles. I mean, my God, 10 years ago, we had the 6. As you mentioned, and my God, what do we at? Like, did you say 280 something now? Is how many we have?
Oh,
Oh,
334 or something like that. Yeah.
oh wow. Okay. Wow. I'm gonna
Yes.
skip it.
Yeah, 300. Yeah, it's a lot, and they come out faster than I can read them. But man, I know a lot of people are not as fortunate with space, but I have a spot downstairs.
Okay.
Let me throw up a picture here to show you.
Yeah.
Where did it go?
That's awesome. Wow.
This is a portion of my library, and
A
it's
portion.
taken like I can't believe how much space it takes.
Hmm.
And you can see like I have to like move books every single time a
Yeah.
new Epic collection comes and retire books and or put them on a different shelf. And like you can see I have all my kids comics are there on the right, with
Sure.
some of the not so kids ones a little bit higher up.
Yeah.
But the kids ones have to move to a different part of my house altogether to make room for the Epic collections every time they come. But yeah, that's a complete set there of
Fantastic.
334 Epic collections, I think it is.
Awesome.
Yeah,
You know what's
pretty cool.
what's good about the epics, I suppose, is that given the nature of how they're released, you could have placeholders in there. It's good. Like Volume 5 hasn't come out yet of a certain series. You just leave a space in there. I kind of did that with Hulk. I had like I've got the old, the proto epics here that I'd worked on way back, and those were like that kind of I put those on the shelf, and that way whenever the epics come out for those, and which one already has, I can replace it that way. But yeah, I've got like a stack right here beside me that I just haven't found room for yet, and I'm gonna have to take a day and do that.
That's right. Okay, so I invited you on the show because we've actually done a bunch of Hulk episodes on the podcast. I know you're a big Hulk fan, and
Yeah.
I have some epics to unbox. I have some new comics. I have a box here, and I've got a bag here, and we're gonna take a look at these epic collections and see what's here, and maybe talk about them. And I know there's one
Yeah.
in here that you are going to enjoy.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
I think it's New Warriors, isn't it?
New Warriors, yeah, right. I know a lot of people have some questions about my shelves here, and I'll answer these questions after I finish talking with Alex. So we can you can hold on up on those questions, and we'll get to them in a little bit. So
Yeah.
first epic collection to talk about here.
I feel like it's Christmas morning and I'm watching another kid opening his presents, and I'm very jealous.
This is Hawkeye Epic Collection Volume 2. It's called The Way of the Arrow. And this is a significant epic collection because it actually collects the Solo Avengers series. Did you ever read that, Alex?
I never did. No, I've read it in retrospect, and there was a trade that came out. I think it was Hawkeye Solo Adventures. Yeah, the one on the left. I think maybe that's it. Yeah. So that's as far as I've gotten into it. So this
yeah,
will be
so
good.
this one collected the first 10 issues, and this one takes us up to issue 20. It's issues 1 through 20 of Solo Avengers, or actually it goes to issue 21, which they changed the name at that point to Avengers Spotlight. But this is significant because a lot of times these epic collections will only print certain material from the issues because the other parts don't relate to the character. But this collects all of the backup stories that have a bunch of other characters not starring Hawkeye. Now, of course, Hawkeye did get the solo feature at the beginning of each one of these stories, but all of the backups, it's really nice to have those collected in here. So really, really good.
Yeah, cool.
Let's see here. I'll have to I'll do another YouTube live stream where we can like take a look inside another time, like in more detail, because we have some other stuff to get into right here. Where's my knife? So this box here has a few more epic collections.
Now, who do you buy?
I'm going to save the.
If I may
Pardon?
ask, who do you normally buy from, or are you allowed to say that?
Well, the epic collections, actually, I do want to shout out to David Gabriel, who sends me comps so I can promote them on the YouTube channel. But I have a store called Pulp Fiction Books that I like to shop at on Main Street in Vancouver, and then also have a comic book store that is sadly going out of business called Eighth Dimension, and I would buy stuff from them all the time.
Okay.
Run by a good guy. Fortunately, Vancouver is just a really expensive place to be.
Okay.
Okay, this is the first one. It's a reprint of Daredevil Epic Collection Volume 2, Mike Murdock Must Die.
Thank God.
And this one...
Sorry, I never cared for the character.
Die. Oh, man. This is classic Stan Lee and Gene Colan stuff. And it's been out of print for a long time, goes for a lot of money, and now it's coming back to print. These are all epic collections that are coming out in October. So, yeah, there you go. Volume 2 epic collection. And then, let's see here. Moon Knight Volume 7, Death Watch. This is from the Mark Spector Moon Knight series from the 90s. And this series has, let me see, here's I got to look at the credits. I am so not familiar with Moon Knight. Bruce Jones, or Moon Knight from the 90s, I should say. Bruce Jones, Terry Kavanagh, Doug Mensch, Howard Mackey. We've got some really, really good creators on here. Alex Saviuk, Dennis Cowan, Ty Templeton does a story in there. That's kind of cool. This is volume 7, and they did volumes 1 through 4 in order, and now they're skipping ahead to volume 7. But that's because they've been doing omnis for these, and so this takes place right after the second omnibus, and so we're gonna have to wait until we get through the selling period for the omnis before they jump back and fill in that gap. Do you like Moon Knight? Are you a Moon Knight fan, Alex?
I read one. I haven't read a lot. I've got the epics. I actually read one today with Brother Voodoo in it because I was finishing my Brother Voodoo masterwork, and there's that one. I think it's like issue 21 or something like that. So I read that. He's a cool character. I did see the miniseries. Not my favorite, but I kind of want to read more. You know, I like the whole schizophrenic. Well, I don't know if he's not schizophrenic, but like he's got the multiple personalities, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's
If
just
I could recommend, you check out Epic Collection number 2
okay.
and
Yeah.
Bad Moon Rising. No, what's that one called? Shadow of the Moon, I think. I
Okay.
can't remember which one that's called, but it's when he gets his own series,
Okay.
and it's just really, really fantastic stuff. That one is Bill Sienkiewicz's on artwork, and you see the evolution of his craft. It's really, really fun stuff. So if you haven't jumped into Moonlight Night at all, and you want a good place to start, you don't have to read the first volume to jump right into the second one and go heavy in it. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting segueing into a book you're about to unveil. Of course, Moon Knight was a backup feature in the Hulk magazine, which is kind of
That's
cool.
right.
In fact, one of there was one that had Hulk and Moon Knight together in it. One of those that I did read, obviously.
Right, and I remember that one was I think that story, Moon Knight was at the time he was affected by the phases of the moon. Like the fuller the moon, the more powerful he was.
Yeah.
And so I think it was like a thin crescent moon when he was going up against the Hulk, so he wasn't at his strongest.
Really bad time.
Okay, so here's the last
Yeah.
book here. I save it for you. This is Incredible Hulk: The Curing of Dr. Banner. Sorry, The Curing of Dr. Banner. This is volume 8 in the Epic Collection.
Yeah.
And just flipping through this,
here's
looks pretty good.
Where the name comes from.
Oh, yeah, there you go. You got the original issues.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Tell me about this issue here. This book. It collects Incredible Hulk 201 to 226 and annual number 6. What can we expect when we read this?
Well, let me see. We left off with Hulk going inside the brain of Glenn Talbot to fight off this evil, I guess you'd call it this evil influence or entity inside his brain. So now he's gone subatomic. That's where we left off in the last volume. And so with 201 through 203, he's still in that tiny universe. Catches up with Jarella again, the villain Cyclop, singular. And so that's cool. Go back to that. 204, Herb Trimpe is back for an issue. I think he actually might have written that story where Banner tries to go back in time to reverse the whole situation where Rick Jones went to save where he tried to save Rick Jones's life, and he did save his life, but he sacrificed his own life basically and became the Hulk. So he tries to go back in time to see if he can save Rick and save his humanity at the same time, I guess you could say. Not wanting to give away spoilers, but 205 is a very tragic story, as is kind of the norm with the Hulk anyway. He brings Jarella back to Earth, and some bad stuff happens.
It always does.
Yeah. 206 is, of course, the cover of that book. The annual as well. That's kind of interesting because we've got the people who created Warlock, the scientists who created Warlock are back again, trying to create a different, I think, trying to one-up themselves and create one that will actually stay with them and stay loyal, as I recall.
Yeah.
And then 206, Hulk's on the Rampage, and that's a classic cover, I think, by I think Dave Cocker was on that one. Yeah. Also, I went too far.
Where is 206? 207. Oh, here, look at this splash page.
Yeah, the Defenders. Yeah. Pretty cool, right?
That's a great image here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
This is Sal Buscema. He had such a long run on Hulk, and this is kind of right in the middle of it. Yeah. And just really, really great stuff. Look at that.
Yeah.
Little 8-bit grind there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good volume. I think it's brings us up to a Roger Stern's run to the beginning of that. And in fact, I think the Curing of Dr. Banner story in number 223 was I didn't want to jump too far, but was the beginning of Stern's run. But yeah, other issues in there. You've got let me see, Dr. Druid is in there, the former Dr. Droom. And you got there's some great artwork with Sal Buscema inked by Ernie Chan. It was a really, really great inker. Really brought Sal's pencils to life.
And Ernie would ink Sal's brother on Conan, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Small World. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. the Constrictor. A few kind of one-off villains. He meets Jack of Hearts in 214. The three, and I think you're looking at the 3-in-1 man or whatever that is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's I think we saw him only
Oh
once.
man, that's so good. I've never read that issue before, but that robot with the three guys in
Yeah,
that looks so awesome.
yeah,
Uh, I tell you, there's so much fun in the 70s Hulk,
yeah,
and I think a lot of people write it off, and I certainly did for the longest time, write it off with like, oh, every issue is a Hulk smash,
yeah,
and it's like he only says three words, and it's the same thing every time. But
yeah.
as we can see here, there's so much variety in the guest stars and the
Oh
weird
yeah,
villains, and they just go nuts, and it's a
yeah.
lot of fun.
It was fun. It was a good. Len Wein was doing a really great job writing the title at this point. I told him once I think he did the best Hulk voice, in terms of the way that Hulk speaks. There is kind of a certain way that seems to work, and other ways that don't work. I don't know. At least that's how I feel. Yeah, the Circus of Crime. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Really nice.
That was a sad story right there. That was a really kind of beautiful. I love that. The stories are really kind of evoke a little bit of romance, the tragedy. A Doc Samson that's kind of a Doc Samson solo tale right there. One cool thing about 219.
Here's
Yeah,
look at that cover.
that's awesome.
That
So
is just amazing.
if I may put a plug out to Rick Parker, a friend of mine, I think that might have been his first lettering job for Marvel. He'd been working there for a few years prior to this point, but that was so that was pretty cool. And he was doing a lot of lettering, and of course he became really, with the Spider-Man titles, he became, I think, a lot more known there and established. But it was a cool beginning.
It's known for his Beavis and Butthead comics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
This is I can't wait to read this and talk to you about these issues in more detail when we hopefully will cover it at some point on the podcast. I've been so busy lately. I haven't done a podcast episode in a long time, but I'll get back into the swing of things, and we'll pick up where we left off.
I brought my Masterwork along in case
Nice.
you catch up, because when you mentioned this book, I was like, geez, have I gotten that yet? I don't think so, because I get them through the mail as well. And but I guess you said it's not coming out. It's not supposed to be out till next month.
This is not out until I can tell you the exact date on this one. October 24. This one's coming out October 24, and Moon Knight is the week before that it's coming out the same day. Moon Knight and Hulk the same day on the October 24th. Hawkeye the week before that on the 17th. So yeah, let me see here. What is your favorite Hulk epic collection?
It's funny you should mention that, because I'm glad that Omar answered that question, because that gave me sort of a chance to grab this one. The reason I like this one a lot is because traditional collections of the Hulk had, like, the first Masterwork only had 1 through 6 in it, and then the second one picked up with Tales to Astonish. What I like about this one is it collects every single Hulk appearance up to his run, the beginning of his run in Tales to Astonish, and it even includes Astonish 59 in it, which was he wasn't an established character in the title yet. He was just kind of a sort of a villain in a way for Giant Man and the Wasp. But I just like that with this book, you basically have all Hulk's adventures for pretty much like the first 2.5 years, which I was really glad that Marvel put it out that way. And it's just because, I mean, it's you're missing out a lot if you read Hulk 1 through 6 and then jump back on with Tales to Astonish. You miss a lot of key things. Obviously, his time with the Avengers, the big fight with the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and his fight with Spider-Man. There's some cool stuff in between. So.
Absolutely. And one of the benefits of that collection over other collections that are, these compilation epic collections, is that they're pretty much all written and drawn by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And so you have the consistency of the voice and of the look. So it's kind of like you're just reading a Hulk volume, and then all of these guest stars come in every single issue.
Yeah, exactly. And what's kind of funny too is the old Hulk cartoon from the 60s that we were talking about with that awesome theme song. One of the episodes, or it might have been a 2-parter or something, was pulled from Avengers #2. So they'd worked that into the Hulk cartoon series, as even though it was from an Avengers comic, but it was basically like a Hulk episode, which is kind of cool.
Nice. Yeah, and then that. So okay, I gotta ask you: does your shirt have the backside as well?
It does. I guess I got to show proof. Yeah. So I don't know if you can see that or not, but he's walking away with that little toy on wheels. Is that
Yep,
yeah?
there goes the perfect. I love that. It's so funny. It's just a great shirt. I gonna have to try and find one for myself.
It was either this or my tuxedo for this podcast, so I thought I'd go with this
That's
instead.
perfect. Oh, okay. So those two Hulk books you have at the back there, the
Hmm.
proto epics
Yes.
as they were.
Yeah. These guys right here, the three. Yeah. Yep.
So they were made before the epic collections
Mhm.
were a thing, and they were kind of they follow the same format as them, trying to have these huge chunky
Yeah.
paperbacks collecting something like a long run in order in an unbroken run. Um, when they Do you think they're going to be any different at all when they appear in the epic collections?
I think so. I think just because the one that already came out, the one that has
Rose?
it collects the end of Crossroads exactly. Because I believe the beginning there, the beginning point, I think it starts at 297. Which
Okay.
cuts a little bit into, when we were doing the research on these, I mean, this one, Crossroads, is very clear. Um, Very clear. I mean, basically starting right with 301, where Hulk's in the Crossroads, and it ends with him leaving the Crossroads. So I think with the epic, they decided to go a little bit just to make it a little bit meatier and include the other three issues, and probably helps a couple volumes down the line as well to bring in some of the
Yeah.
other elements. So, because I know we'd left out like annual, people were complaining about this one, like why we left out annual 11. I think it was 11, yeah. But it didn't go along with the whole, like, the Hulk having Banner's mind theme.
Right.
So that's why we left that up. But one thing that was really cool with these volumes, I mean, my first Hulk comics were like 293 onward, and I just turned 5, so it was kind of neat. I'd seen the cartoon that had been on TV a few months earlier, and didn't know there was a Hulk comic book. And so it was being able to work on these books almost 30 years later at that point was really cool, because it was just finally seeing these comics that were really near and dear to me collected was really awesome. And just the tragedy of, it's kind of like Flowers for Algernon. It's like Bruce Banner finally gets what he wants. He can control the Hulk, but each issue he's slipping away, and the corner boxes of each one showing, like, I love that at the time. It's like the first one shows him like very like a scientist, and then each month he was getting, he was like working on, like, he had his beakers and stuff, and he dropped it and he turns savage. Each month you could see the change in the corner box, which I loved, So, yeah.
I love that too. Yeah, that I love it when they play with the corner boxes like that. It's really
Yeah.
fun stuff.
Yeah. So it'll be fun to see
Wow.
those get into epic, versions as well, someday. And it was so cool. Like back when the essentials were coming out, like for me, it was like the Masterworks are way too expensive, as a little kid, but the essentials were this really cost-effective way to get these books. But unfortunately, of course, they're black and white. And I kept thinking, like, I just wish that there could be a color version of this, something that's sort of like price point wise, somewhere not too much more than the essentials, but obviously cheaper than the Masterworks. And, soft cover instead of hardcover to save some money, hopefully. And so it was really nice to hear that there would be, 10 years ago or so, that there would be this new format coming out. And I was just like Omar, I got, this one right when it came out as well. And, it's funny, like opening this at the time, and these were like the upcoming, and it's like now you open up a new one, and
Yeah, look at
it's
this.
like 2
The,
pages.
the writing is so small, and it's on the front and on the back. 340
Yeah.
or whatever it lists.
Right.
Epic collections. Unreal. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that it's lasted this long, because a lot of initiatives won't last. Like it's not sustainable or whatever. But I think we've got a good group of Marvel fans that
Yeah.
have really, really well supported the line.
Yeah.
And not just the Marvel stuff, but the Star Wars stuff. And
Sure.
we would have kept on buying Conan had the license
Yeah.
stuck around and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But
Yeah. I really felt like at the time, it really felt like kind of a gutsy move on Marvel's part to do that, to put it out like that. And I like the idea of it. I like the idea of, like an old friend of mine once said, like, life is short, eat dessert first. And I like the idea of, like, let's jump to this. We know this part of the series in the 80s was really great, and people really want to see a collection of this. Let's just do that instead of waiting 10 years to get through all the other volumes leading up to it. And so I love that they did that. But of course, the big risk is if the program had petered out 2 years in, you would have had this very, like, all these holes in this collection. And like
totally.
Like you guys are talking about, it was wise not to put the volume number on the spine, because that way, at least if it petered out, you wouldn't have these awkward looking books, like 1, 5, 17, whatever. To me, it's kind of like all these puzzle pieces, like we were kind of given these sort of puzzle pieces, and over time it's creating this big picture that's finally coming together with some of these. And like you guys are talking about with Captain America, I mean, that's nearly complete, I think, now, right? And some of these.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's always the chance that it'll still peter out. Can you imagine if we get down to one more Captain America volume and then they stop it? Oh no. Wow.
But it's, I think given the momentum,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, given the momentum, I think I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to see these things completed and see what happens after that.
I think just the fact that they are reprinting, I mean, it's only 2 a month. I say only 2 a month, but that's a huge thing for a publisher to go back and put that many books back in print. Like, that's a big deal. And so it really speaks to the strength of the line and the fact that it's the fan base is growing. If the fan base wasn't growing, we wouldn't need to reprint any books. But it's growing, and it's great to see them come back. So I also think that we will be seeing this. Maybe I'll have a 20-year anniversary in 2034. Can you believe that?
Gosh. Well, yeah.
We'll see. We'll have to see.
I guess the question is, where do you go after you complete these big runs? I mean, obviously we've seen the modern collection and that kind of thing. I
think that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing right there, is that they have they've started the modern era, because the classic era is finite. But the modern era will always be expanding. There will always be new stuff. So it's like 10 years down the road, the stuff that's being published this week will be able to come in nice big fat trades. But we're also not done with the classic era. Spectacular Spider-Man, Alpha Flight, Marvel Team Up. There are lots of other series, long-running series, that can still be entered into the classic era of Marvel Comics, the Epic Collections, as well as a ton of shorter series as well, especially in the 90s when they started just pumping out stuff. There's lots of material. Maybe not all of it's great, but I don't think that they will be hurting for content anytime soon.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'll be interested to see if at some point there might be like, I don't know if there'd be a Spider-Man collection, like almost like a companion series to Amazing Spider-Man that would have, I don't know what the best route would be. I mean, should there be a Marvel Team Up series, a Web of Spider-Man series, or should they be grouped together? I just don't,
It's a great question. And I know, like, in particular, I know that Web of Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man, for the most part, are separate, but there's a good chunk of it where Conway was writing both titles, and they acted as one story. And then again, once they get into the Clone Saga stuff, it's all one story. So they could collect Spectacular and Web, and I wouldn't be disappointed, as long as it comes out, because there's lots of stuff that I've never read, and I love Spider-Man. So more Spider-Man is what I say.
For sure. Yeah.
Anyway, our time is up here, Alex. I want to thank you for being a special guest on this celebration, for talking to us about the Hulk and unboxing these epics with me. It was a blast.
Thank you for having me, Kurtis. Great to see you.
Okay, see you later.
See you later. Take care, man.
Okay, so now is the part of the show where I'm going to just turn it over to you. What do you want to talk about? We have half an hour before our next guest, and I will answer some questions. You can leave them in the chat, and if you want to tell me your favorite Epic collection, Tell me why you think epics are so great. And let me scroll back through the comments and see if I can pick out some of those questions you had earlier. Joel says, is the new Miracle Man by Alan Moore considered an epic? I don't think so. It's not listed in any of the books or anything like that. The technical title is Miracle Man, the original epic. So they have the word epic in the title, but it's not epic collection. It's the original epic. So you don't have to get that if you don't want to, but I would recommend it because I've read the first several issues of that series and it's really good. So pick that one up. Let's see, more questions here. Yeah, we already said that he has the backup stories. Oh, Hawkeye asked this question. That's very fitting. This epic collection does have all the backup stories. You can show some of this artwork while we wait for some questions to come in. Let's see here. Solo Avengers starring Hawkeye and Black Knight. Black Knight gets the backup story in this one. And here's one with Scarlet Witch. Here's one with the Falcon. That's not a great cover, although it's kind of cool to see that skull there. What is the biggest want for a volume for an epic, and what's the biggest miss you believe for something to be collected? What's the biggest miss? The biggest want, well, something that hasn't been collected yet. I mentioned earlier the Nick Fury Agent of Shield. I do really want to have that. I think that's great. It's a series that's worthwhile, and it hasn't been collected in paperback. I mean, the Strange Tales stories have been collected in paperback, but once Nick Fury has his own title after the Jim Steranko issues, that stuff is only an omnibus. So I would like to see that volume come out in Epic Collection. Oh, here's a question here. Do you think we'll ever get a comprehensive Marvel Comics Presents Epic line? I would love that because there are so many just random stories that will never show up anywhere else. For instance, there's the new Epic collection, the new Venom Epic collection that just came out is called The Mace. No, it's called The Madness, but it has a story in there called The Mace, and it introduces a new character called The Mace. And this was a character that Carl Potts created, and he had done a story in The Punisher a couple years before, starring these characters called the Shadow Masters, and he made the Mace one of the Shadow Masters. And the Mace has never appeared anywhere else except for a 4-issue serial in Marvel Comics Presents. And I was hoping that Marvel would just add that story in the Epic collection as a bonus feature because there's literally no other place for that because it only relates to this one Venom story, but they didn't. So where's it going to appear? No idea, unless we have a Marvel Comics Presents Epic line. The only problem is that Marvel Comics doesn't do collections of anthology lines. They don't like to brand their anthologies. They like to have character branding on all of their stuff. So I don't know how they would swing it. I mean, I guess maybe they could do Marvel Comics Presents starring Wolverine or Marvel Comics Presents starring Ghost Rider because they were some of the headliner characters for a lot of the series. But I don't know. I would love it, though. I would love it. Do epics ever skip an issue for some reason? Yes. The only reason I've seen so far for an epic to skip an issue is for licensing, and that is in the second Power Man and Iron Fist epic collection. They skip over issue 73 because Rom the Space Knight is in that issue. And Rom, of course, is a licensed property that Marvel did not have the license for at the time. They currently do have the license for Rom, but as far as I understand, they are not allowed to just stick those issues in another collection. They can only be in ROM Central collections. So we might get ROM Epic collections at some point. That would be great, and we'll probably see that Power Man Iron Fist issue in that. or you'll have to buy the ROM omnibus that's coming out soon, because that will more than likely have all of those guest appearances as well. Let's see. Another one is, I saw one about Indiana Jones. Where did just got here a few moments ago. What volume of Hulk is that? This is volume 8. It's coming out in October. It's called The Curing of Dr. Banner. I just got this box in the mail. We just opened it up to see what was inside. So we saw that and Hawkeye volume 2 and also Moon Knight volume 7. Those are all coming out in October. Oh, here it is. The Indiana Jones epics. Do you think we can still expect them at this point? You know what? I would have thought that if they were going to capitalize on the movie, like the epic collections often do, they would have done that, because especially with Harrison Ford bowing out of any future Indiana Jones movies, doesn't have the same sort of selling point. From what I understand, there is some sort of licensing, some sort of licensing thing with Paramount, where they I don't know, there's probably some sort of fees that Marvel has to pay. Marvel is very particular, of course, because it affects their bottom line. I don't know how much money epics bring in. It and if you're talking about a licensed property, if they make a certain amount of revenue on an epic collection, and then you have to cut into that revenue by now adding a licensing fee on top of that, it may not be worth it to the bean counters at Marvel to do that. I would love it, because there is not only the Marvel series, the further adventures of Indiana Jones, but all of the Dark Horse stuff that they did. We could have lots of Indiana Jones volumes. Marvel also did all of the adaptations for the movies. Curtis, do you think Marvel will reprint the complete Clone Saga epic and the complete Ben Reilly epic, or should I just start collecting the omnibuses after Amazing Spider-Man Epic Volume 27? I'm sure that they're going to reprint all of them. The Clone Saga gets a bad rap, but a lot of people like it. The Omnis, there are how many Omnis are three? Are there no? There's four. There's two Clone Saga Omnis and two Ben Reilly Omnis, right? Is that right? And they've all been reprinted because the demand is there. And those complete Clone Saga and complete Ben Reillys, I believe at least all of the complete Clone Saga ones were reprinted as well, because some of them have the red Marvel logo on a white background, and then the reprints have the updated white Marvel logo on the red background on the spine. So people want them, and now that the epic collections are up to that point, I'm sure we're going to get the whole thing. Absolutely, because it sells. Simple as that. Not sure if branding would fall in line. Surely the branding would fall in line similar to What If, right? No character branding there, but that got plenty of omnis and completes. I guess it did have the show, though, as a counterpoint, and that is exactly the reason right there. They put those out when the What If TV show came out, and Marvel has been very consistent in putting out collections that relate to whatever the most recent Disney Plus show is. So when they did the What If complete collections, yes, that was exactly when the show came out, and then they followed them up with the What If Omnis. And they were going to do a What If Omni of the 90s series, but then that one got shelved, and I wonder if they're holding that for when What If Season 2 comes out. By this point, the What If complete collections are actually mostly, I think all of them are out of print now. So it might be a good time to start a What If Epic collection line. That would be totally fine. And they could start in the middle or toward the end or whatever with random volumes of the What If series from the 90s. And they wouldn't have to overlap with the Omnis, and it would be giving us stuff that wasn't in the complete collections. Sounds like a great idea to me. Do we know what the modern epic Spider-Girl will contain compared to the complete collections? Yes, let me see here. The Spider-Girl, I guess actually maybe we don't have the contents yet on that. I can't remember if we do. I'm pretty sure we do have the contents, but I don't remember what it is. It's going to be very similar. It might, in fact, be a straight port to as the from the complete collections. Any word on future Punisher epics? There is no word yet. Maybe we'll see some in the next round of collections, but I really don't really know. Just a reminder for everybody, coming up at 8:30, I will have Mike Hansen or sorry, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. I'll have Mike Hansen coming on to talk about Star Wars Epic Collections because he's been working on those books a lot. And then after that, I'll have Mark Beasley, who was a collections editor for Epic Collections for several years. And he's got some really neat things to say and some stuff to show. So just stay tuned for when that moment comes on. But we have some time still before that happens, and I'll take a few more of your questions here. Do we know how long epics stay in print before they're gone? The answer to that is it depends on how many people are buying them. And also depends on how big the print run is. I think that they don't print the same amount of epics for every epic because Spider-Man print runs, I'm sure, are going to be a lot bigger than, let's say, Namor the Submariner. It's just a fact that Spider-Man is going to sell more books. So those print runs are bigger. That also means more people are buying them, and that it'll run out fast. So there's no actual one answer to that. If the book is popular, it'll go quickly. If it's not popular, it'll stay around for a little bit longer. I think Ant-Man, the first volume, took like 7 years before that one sold out of its first printing, whereas the X-Men volume that contained the Dark Phoenix saga was gone like within a week. It was really fast, maybe 2 weeks, but super quick. Do you know something about Spectacular Spider-Man epics? You know, the only thing I know is that about a year ago, maybe a year and a half, David Gabriel sent Omar a note while Omar was doing a live stream saying that yes, Spectacular Spider-Man epics will come eventually. So they are coming at some point. We just don't know when it is. How would Marvel ever do an epic collection of the Darth Vader by Charles Soule run? I haven't read it, so I can't comment exactly, but I do know that they are starting the Star Wars Modern Era Epic Collections in 2024. In fact, I have a picture that I have loaded in here. We'll talk. I don't know if we're going to talk about this with Mike a little bit later, but we can mention it here. As you can see, they are going to do the Star Wars Modern Era Epic Collection Volume 1. This one is Star Wars Volume 1. I'm sure another will be Darth Vader Volume 1 and maybe Dr. Aphra Volume 1, that kind of stuff. But this one has the first 14 issues plus Vader Down and Darth Vader 13 to 15 because that was a big crossover. And unlike the Legends stuff, these ones are going to be collecting it by series because since this is an ongoing thing, we have no idea when it's going to stop. So they can't really publish it in timeline order because you never know what stories are going to be written in the future. Let's see here. Do you think Marvel will do an epic collection of the Mighty Avengers era? I bet they will. Again, the Brian Michael Bendis, love him or hate him, he sells. And so once the new Avengers and Mighty Avengers, they were running, I think, side by side, right? At some point, they'll probably do that at some point too in epic collection. Oh, Phil, great question. If you were put in charge of epics, would you make any changes? Yes. I would definitely make some changes. I wouldn't make any big changes. I think they're pretty good as they are. I am quite happy with the way the epic collections are put together. I would just make sure that things like Astonishing X-Men Modern Era Epic Collection, which is only 12 issues, I'd bump that up to be a more appropriate page size to match the rest. That one's too thin. I'd put in the next story arc so that we could get it all the way to issue 16 or 18 or whatever it goes to. Because that's, yeah, 18 issues is a fine Epic Collection. I would make sure that Age of Apocalypse gets included in the Epic Collections. I would probably remap all of the modern eras. Then my one beef with the modern era Epic Collections is that they don't put a lot of the big stories in it, so you feel like you're missing some stories. I which sure, buy the little thin trade of that mini series and supplement your collection there, but I would love to have it all in one. Um, I've seen some random out of print epics that come back in low stock on Amazon. For instance, Doctor Strange Volume 13. Does Marvel stealth reprint epics, or is it likely a leftover stock situation? That's most likely a leftover stock situation. They by stealth reprint, you mean just go back to press to print more copies because they don't have to resolicit if it just goes back to press with the same printer and everything. And so that I don't think that happened with Doctor Strange Volume 13. They probably just found a box that was in the corner somewhere or something like that. But there you go. Did they have announced a volume 2 for New Avengers Epic Collection? Yes, they did. Or we did. Omar and I did announce that, and since then Marvel has pulled it from the schedule. I think they just reshuffled a few things, so they'll put it probably in the fall, the summer of the fall. But yes, we did announce it. It's called Civil War. So that's the big event that happens in that era. Any thoughts on collecting more modern X-Men runs? Extreme, Astonishing past Whedon, X Factor? I'm absolutely certain that Astonishing will go past. Once they've started, they're not. I don't think they're going to plan to stop. So they'll keep going with Astonishing X-Men, which is fine by me. X Factor, I would love to see modern epic collections with the X Factor Investigations era with Peter David. That stuff is people are always asking for that the continuation of those complete collections. Um, Extreme X-Men's getting an omnibus, right? So I don't up anytime soon. But any of those new X-Men ones, it's going to be really hard to map modern X-Men epic collections. I can't even imagine what they do if they try to get to the Krakoa era because there's a lot of stuff that just kind of gets right. So yeah, we'll have to see. Why did they change the font for modern epics? Why not the same as classic epics? And I think the main reason there is because they want to differentiate from the classic stuff. They want it similar enough that it's still the same thing, but they want it to have a life of its own. That's my guess anyway. I often wonder if they also just don't want to have epic collections so big on the front. Because if these are going to be the way that Marvel reprints all of their stuff forever, it doesn't necessarily need to be called an epic collection. So I wonder if they want to downplay the term epic collection on those modern epic collection covers just so that it looks like it's a Spider-Gwen collection rather than an epic collection because it's very, very tiny up there in the corner now. That's just my guess. I don't know if that's the actual real reason. I just realized X-Men Classic Epics will most likely go up to around 2001. How many volumes would that be? Like 30 plus? Now, I tried mapping this up based on just the thick trades that that are kicking around already, and it got up to like 40 something. Let's see if I can find that. um, because if you got to remember you're including both X-Men and Uncanny X-Men in one line, and then there's so many different mini series and stuff. Um, it gets a little ridiculous. But let me see here. I don't know. I can't find it. It's on my. If you go to the Facebook group, the Epic Collection Facebook group, and you do a little search for X-Men. I don't know what you even search for, but I did it. It's like 42 or 43 volumes. It's pretty huge. What will be the first Epic volume that will have the entire classic timeline listed in the end covers? I hope it's not Amazing 16. What will be the probably Captain America, because we're only 3 volumes away from the post-era collection there, unless they really slow down on how fast they release that, but I don't know that they will. Inhumans gets no love. Oh, I like that. Pop-O-Matic Trouble avatar you have there, Brandon. Omnis, no Omnis, no Epics, and a very small amount of MAWs. I don't know what that means. Think that there will be any chance we get an Epic run of them? I think that for some reason the Inhumans are still, Marvel is still soured on the Inhumans from the TV show that was really terrible. And I don't know. They don't seem to be pushing those characters very much. A little bit here and there. Oh, MMW, he says Marvel Masterworks. No Marvel Masterworks. There were Inhumans Marvel Masterworks, weren't there? I thought there were. Um, yeah, yes, there absolutely were Marvel Masterworks for Inhumans. There were 2 of them. So let's see here. If we get Inhuman Epic Collections, I'm pretty sure they'll just rebrand the previous complete collections. They weren't actually called complete collections, but they were epic-sized trades. The Origin of the Inhumans and Beware the Inhumans. Those were great books. I got those and read them, and they're fantastic. They would be great for epic collections. So let's get them going. We could do modern era epic collections as well. But just the fact that they are willing to take Miss Marvel and change her from being an Inhuman to an X-Men shows kind of says that they don't really have faith in that brand still at this time. So we're going to have to wait a while, I think. They might have to do, I think Marvel marketing will have to do a little bit of work to get them back in the public eye. How many Spider-Man epics will be released in 2024? Probably just 2. Most of these long lines is 2 a year. They'll pick one older volume and one newer volume, and we'll get one of those each year. And so we already know both of them for 2024. It's going to be January. We'll see the Clone Saga, which is volume 27, and then a little later, what month is that? June, I think. May, we're going to get volume 10, which is called Big Apple Battleground. Will we get epic collections for the Eternals? Yeah, maybe. Will there ever be a second Eternals movie? I don't know. But that would be the great time to launch that. They released most of the classic Eternals material as complete collections when the first movie came out, and at that point, I even asked if they could be epics instead, and that's when we heard Omar say that he was told not everything can be an epic. That was one of those instances where not everything could be an epic, but these days, I bet it would be an epic. Okay, maybe one more question here. What's the one line you wish they published more than 2 a year? That would definitely be Spider-Man, because there is more than enough Spider-Man to publish kind of forever. They need to ramp up the pace on those ones. Still waiting for more 2-in-1 volumes. It might be the only one, but I would like to see Quasar epic. See, that would be great to see Quasar. So there is volume 2 of Marvel 2-in-1 is coming out in January, so you don't have too far to wait for that one. Okay, so we have just about 5 minutes left before we're going to get on with Mike Hansen. We've been on for an hour and a half already, and some of you might be getting a little fidgety. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, go to the bathroom, refill your water, and we'll be back in 5.5 minutes to talk with Mike about epics. And while we wait, I've got a little something to show you.
Simmer down, Glamour Pants. I'm just changing a curly fuse.
But you know the rules. Nobody tampers with the equipment except Tony Stark.
Okay, so he lends us his townhouse rent-free. That doesn't make you his official snoop, Grandpa. I'm warning you, you overrated has-been. I've been itching for a chance to change that part of your hair.
No, Hawkeye, don't.
Rats. I'm going out for some fresh air.
Good idea. Come on, Cap.
Oh, dear, why are we always getting into arguments lately? Because my spell of evil is working, Avengers. They are doomed, Power Man, especially Captain America.
What a waste. I could finish them with power. Why all this sorcery?
Because united, the Avengers are strong. But they will not be united long. Come, it is time to begin the attack of the Enchantress. Up there! Look!
Is that for real? Look at the size of it.
It's 30 feet high.
And coming right at us.
But there's something unreal about it.
It's real enough to be stopped with a blast arrow. My arrow! It went right through him without detonating.
Just as I thought.
My hex power will stop it.
He doesn't even feel it. Stay back. I want to prove something. I'm guessing my shield will go right through him, too.
What happened?
It just vanished.
Winghead will claim he did it with his frying pan fling.
Ha! Look at them, Power Man. Trying to blame a monster conjured up for their eyes alone. And even after they've explained, the damage they've done will still be a stain upon their record.
Back at headquarters, there's little time to puzzle over the strange apparition.
Cap, I've tuned in a saboteur, reporting to someone. He's tampering with the 8th Avenue subway tracks.
There are just minutes between those trains.
Quicksilver, we'll follow you. You've got to use your speed.
Right, Cap.
Like a dazzling beam of light, the fastest human alive races through miles of subway tunnels. Until finally...
Ah, we hooked one of them gorges.
A train. I've got to stop it.
Hurry! The other Avengers are coming.
I still say I could clobber them all, hand to hand.
Look, Quicksilver's hurt.
We've got to stop that train.
It's empty. A runaway.
Look out. I can do this with a blast arrow.
Somebody knocked me out, Cap. From behind.
The Avengers are running wild!
We had to stop that train, somehow, to save Quicksilver's life.
And to keep the engine from hitting the broken rails.
What broken rails?
They were right there.
It must have been an illusion. But we had to act so fast.
Sweetie, you've really got a bag of tricks. Hey, moving trains, illusions, phony radio messages. But don't forget why you brought me along on this wingding. For my power.
It won't be long now. My sorcery will guarantee your victory.
The Avengers Emergency Fund is emptied by a staggering bill for all the train damages.
Is somebody trying to bust us? Or just make us look like fools?
Someone is trying to discredit us. But why?
And who?
Those illusions were the work of a master magician. Or
the Enchantress.
Enchantress?
Do you really think so, Cap?
Who else has the power? But the big question still is, why?
she would do it just for revenge, Cap.
Yeah, and with old Winghead still in command, she figures the Avengers are easy pickings. Now,
Hawkeye?
No, Cap. We can't waste our energies fighting among ourselves.
Fighting? He knows better than to tangle with me.
Why, you... Cap, don't. Stay out of this, Pietro.
Yeah, it's my fight.
Anytime, loudmouth.
You asked for it. Here's where the Avengers get a new leader.
Oh, no. No, stop. Cap, Hawkeye. Look, it's a court order. Because of the things that have happened, we've been ordered to disband the Avengers.
The end of the Avengers? First step in the Enchantress's diabolical plan. What will her next move be?
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good break. That was, of course, almost like a panel-by-panel adaptation of Avengers 21, which, if you want to find out what happens next, I will encourage you to pick up Avengers Epic Collection Volume 2, called Once an Avenger. That's actually the lead-off story in there. So, yeah, go ahead and get that one if you want to find out what happens next. Okay, so we are going to switch gears and not talk about superheroes right now. We're going to move to a galaxy far, far away and talk about Star Wars with none other than Mike Henson. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Kurtis.
Now, this is a great treat because you've worked quite a bit on the Epic Collections, not just the Epic Collections, but a number of different collections, Star Wars collections for Marvel. I think it's safe to say you are a very big Star Wars fan.
I am, but not nearly as big as my wife. She is a huge Star Wars fan. Pretty much her entire graphic novel collection is what I use as my reference library. So that makes my job a lot easier. And that's also why I make sure that any Star Wars book that I work on, that I put her name in the special thanks, because she deserves it. I hope you don't mind the background. My office is a mess right now, so I figured this might be a little bit better for the stream here.
Hey, well, it relates, so that's fine. I didn't have a fake background, so I had to make actual piles of Epic Collections for myself.
Right on.
Okay, tell us a little bit about your job, Mike.
Well, I pretty much started doing the Epic Collections right from the beginning. Before Disney bought Lucasfilm, there was already talk about doing these Epic Collections, and I was lucky enough to be part of the Marvel research team for about a year or two at that point, putting together some various superhero books. My first one was the Infinity Gauntlet Omnibus. So I got thrown in the deep end with that one. But as soon as news came out that Disney had bought Lucasfilm, I threw up my hand at Marvel and said, look, I used to work for Dark Horse Comics as an editor. I was the assistant editor on the Star Wars line for about 2 years. And did they want me to put together new editions of the old material for them? And, you know, Marvel's smart. They like making money. So they're like, sure, let's talk about that. And it ended up becoming an Epic Collection line. But the way that we decided to do Star Wars was a little bit different, because unlike all these Marvel superhero series, the Star Wars stuff has mostly been published as miniseries. And there were a few monthly series that would last a few years, but then would eventually get replaced with others. So the older stuff kind of jumps all over the old Star Wars timeline. So I thought, okay, well, this is the one opportunity that we might have to collect all of the Legends timeline, what used to be called the Expanded Universe timeline, in chronological order, all the comics. So we had to separate out a couple of things. The original Marvel stuff from the 70s and 80s got its own Epic line, and the newspaper strips got their own Epic line in 2 volumes that collected the reformatted Dark Horse color editions of all the newspaper strips, because otherwise there would have been a lot of story contradictions in the timeline that would have just confused people. So as long as you look at all of them as what ifs, essentially, that you can just enjoy them on their own terms. So I thought, let's just put all of it in order, regardless of when it was published. Let's figure out what makes the most sense to divide it into eras. And I basically use the movies as my starting point for that. Most of the eras end with one of the episode movies. And
I'm going to throw up the image here. This is what you can find on the inside cover of all of the Star Wars epics.
Right.
Nicely broken up here.
Yeah,
These
I thought
are
it
the
was
eras.
interesting how recently with the new High Republic era that's been going for a couple of years with the new Disney era timeline, that Lucasfilm just announced their own official eras for the current timeline. And it's a little bit different from how I broke it up, but I was happy to see that there were some similarities there too.
Why did you decide to no, actually I was going to say, why did you decide to divide them up where they are, but you already answered that because of the movies. Now, okay, so I have another picture I want to show you here. These are the old Dark Horse Omnis. These are paperback omnibuses, and they're a little smaller in size than a standard trade paperback. Did you work on these ones?
I did not. That was after my time at Dark Horse, but I was inspired by how Dark Horse had broken up the old stuff for their omnibus line. So I did end up using a few of those names, like Rise of the Sith. I thought was a great title for the lead up to episode 1. Some of them, like the Other Sons of Tatooine, that ended up having a little bit of overlap between the original trilogy era and the era that followed, where the rebellion becomes the New Republic. So some of this stuff got broken up a little bit differently from how Dark Horse collected it, but I tried to be as absolutely thorough as possible to make sure that everything that I could possibly legally reprint got in these books, because for all I knew, this is like the only chance that we'll ever have to do it like this. So why not go for it?
Right. I have Mark is behind the scenes right now, and he's leaving me little comments like, Mike did a fantastic job breaking everything down. We needed Mike because Marvel didn't even own copies of all the books.
Thanks, Mark.
And another comment, sorry, say that again?
Oh, I'm just saying thanks to Mark. He and I used to email, when he was a part of Marvel on a lot of this stuff, but we've actually never spoken directly in all this time.
Oh, well, closer to the end of the show, of your time here, I'll bring them on so you can have a chat together.
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I want to also, let's see here. Let me go back to this one for just a second. Can you tell me how these the old editions, these Dark Horse ones, how they differ from the new Epic collections? And I know you've sort of touched on that, but I think it's good for people who are trying to you can't just take those books and fill holes when you're missing Epic collections.
Right. And I think that's why we decide, or rather Marvel, I'm sure the sales department decided that when these did get broken up into eras, unlike with the superhero stuff where they started off with stuff that was sort of the least reprinted material, like that Iron Man volume, we decided to start with the volume 1 of each era and then collect them in order of each era. Now they have been coming out, volume 1 of this and volume 1 of that and so on. But we thought that would give readers the best opportunity to follow along with the story. But, sometimes people like their just favorite Star Wars story arc too. Like maybe they only want Dark Empire. They don't care about all the Star Wars, and that's fine. What I try to do, or what I have done rather, is in every volume, I would also write a story so far page that basically gives the reader everything they need to know to understand the volume that they've got in their hands. It's not everything that's happened, but it's everything that you might need to know to make it a little easier to understand.
It's perfect. Yeah, and it keeps with the theme of the movies. It's really, really great. Now,
yeah, I actually pitched that idea to Marvel to do it like that, and I'm happy they went for it because it means a little bit more money for me.
You also seem to be a master at finding the obscure things and tracking down just really cool odds and ends to fit in there. How do you go about doing that?
I appreciate that. I'm a lifelong comics reader and comics collector. So I've saved all of my old Wizard magazines from the 90s or Amazing Heroes from the 80s and whatnot. So there's been a lot of cases where there will be some obscure piece of artwork, maybe a character sketch or an early version of a piece of artwork that only appeared in one place. In fact, I recently discovered there was a version of the Secret Wars #8 Spider-Man Black Costume cover that is not the final cover. That there's the original version's a little bit different, and it's only appeared in one magazine. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's from the 80s, and I'm going to do my darndest to see if I can get it reprinted so people can finally see it, because that's history right there.
Nice.
So same thing, like Dark Empire is a perfect example. So this was originally supposed to come out from Marvel, this miniseries, before the license went to Dark Horse. But for various reasons, there was a lot of foot dragging on making this project happen in the late 80s. Marvel even announced it coming out from Marvel in a Marvel Age one-shot using this piece of promotional artwork right here. And
wow.
I don't know if you recognize that, but it ended up not happening at Marvel, and it happened at Dark Horse a couple of years later. And lucky for the fandom, between that and the new novels by Timothy Zahn, that just completely re-energized Star Wars fandom. And that was what it just kept building until you got the prequel movies, and then exploded. And now we have the sequel movies and the Epic collections collecting all the previous material. So it's like it just keeps building and building to another generation of readers. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, and you know what? You can read these, and I know that Lucas has said that this stuff is not canon anymore, and like whatever. But you can still read these, and it's like it's part of the story. There's still most of them relevant, other than like Dark Empire is probably the most obvious example of something contradicting by the new movies. But for the most part, it's like it doesn't matter. These are still excellent Star Wars stories.
Yeah, I actually read some of these for the first time when I first got the okay to pitch to Marvel how I would collect all this stuff. And fortunately, like I said, I had it all in my house, so it was really easy to go back and read it. And it gave me a new appreciation for just how much effort went into being true to the spirit of Star Wars. A couple weekends ago, I was down in Burbank for a Star Wars fan convention as a guest, Legends Con. And my old boss, Randy Stradley, was there too. He, until recently, was the head of Dark Horse editorial, and he wrote a lot of the Star Wars comics too. And we were talking about just how important it was that the material that got published in the comics was still Star Wars. It still felt like Star Wars. You could get super nerdy if you wanted to. Like, what if there's this alien race that it only has some connection to the Force that people don't have or something? It's like, well, yeah, but how do you turn that into a relatable story? I'm just throwing something out there. I'm sure there could be a good way to tell that story, but there could be some really esoteric stuff that might be less interesting to most people. When you get to a universe as big as Star Wars, it's like if you did all of a sudden you announced a 12-issue Stiltman comic at Marvel. There's going to be a limited audience for that.
Do you have a favorite Star Wars comic story?
Yes. My very favorite is the second X-Wing story arc. It's called The Phantom Affair. And it's plotted by Mike Stackpole, who wrote most of the X-Wing novels. And it's scripted by a Croatian writer named Darko Matsan, who is fantastic. And his regular art partner, Edvin Bukovic, drew most of that story arc. And they had previously done some really fantastic Grendel Tale stuff at Dark Horse. And if you want to read a Star Wars comic that is like reading a movie, get The Phantom Affair, get those X-Wing collections. I think it's New Republic Epic 2 and 3 that collects all the X-Wing stuff. Yeah. And it's like you're reading a movie. It's really great.
Yeah, that story is fantastic. The artwork definitely stands out, and It's just too bad. Yeah, he didn't do like the last 1.5 issues or something, right? Got busy.
Yeah, Edvin was never the fastest artist. He also drew the Last Command adaptation later at Dark Horse, the third Timothy Zahn book. And about halfway through, he had been doing everything himself. And about halfway through, we had to bring in an inker, Eric Schanauer, to help get it out on time. And then you'll see the coloring switched halfway through. It was fully painted on Blue Line, and it switched to digital coloring. And that was right during that transition to digital at a lot of comics publishers. So it was an interesting time.
Right.
Another good example of that back when I was at Dark Horse was I was the assistant editor when the prequel movies were ramping up. So I was one of a very tiny number of people who got to see all of the episode 1 character designs, new ships, new locations, because I spent a week at the color copy machine copying hundreds of pages for every writer and every artist that was going to work on those episode 1 comics. So they'd be out at the same time as the movie.
Yeah, that you must have been thrilled about that. That would be great. Were you married at the time or dating your wife?
That was before we met.
Okay. I was wondering how jealous she would have been.
All of these stories already. I had a couple of panels
sure.
down at Legends Con the other weekend, and I was telling her how it's probably a good thing she didn't come because she's already heard everything that I was going to say.
One of my favorite, I think possibly my favorite, I haven't read nearly, like barely any of the Star Wars stuff, but there's one Star Wars tale story that absolutely blew my mind. And can't remember what it is, but it's Mace Windu and Yoda sitting in a diner.
Yeah.
And it's so good. And it's just like so for those, I'm gonna try to tell everybody about this story because it's just so great, because they're sitting there and he's like, Mace Windu's like, what's so special about this kid? Why don't we want to train him? Why are you so afraid of him? And Yoda's just like, he's gonna bring balance to the Force. And Mace is like, well, what's so bad about that? So Yoda takes a salt shaker and like dumps it all out. And he puts like 2 specks of pepper right there. And he said, this is the salt of the Jedi, and the pepper is the Sith. There's only ever 2 of them. And then he like, with the Force, blows away all of the salt except for 2 grains of salt. Like, that's bringing balance to the Force. Like, that's why, of course. Like, I mean, I didn't get that from watching the movies, but just seeing that is like, wow, that was really, really cool. I love the way that story was told. So good.
Yeah, George Lucas is a more clever writer than people give him credit for. He calls himself a non-writer, but he understands theme very well. So even the things that you can nitpick that maybe don't work for everyone in the prequel movies, there's a lot there that does work, and that's why it connected with a whole new generation of fans. The writer of that story, I think it's called Force Fiction, Takeoff on Pulp Fiction. That writer, Kevin Rubio, did several Star Wars Tales stories, and he also did all the Tag and Bink stories that Marvel collected in
Bink is fantastic.
A few years back.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to do this with my camera, but yeah, they're basically the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of comics of Star Wars. Yeah. They just appear in the background at all the important moments, and
those stories are great.
You guys might know from his fan film Troops, which was the Star Wars version of Cops.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so I know Mark is listening, Mark Beasley, because he's leaving comments. Mark, if you want to come on early and say hi to Mike in person, I'd be more than happy to facilitate that. Okay, I think he's ready to go. Here we go.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
How's it going, Mike? Good to see you.
Good. Nice to finally meet you.
I know, it's crazy. Like, I'm sure we've sent thousands upon thousands of emails back and forth and never act. That's the weird thing about like the whole freelance and editorial existence. You're dealing with these people thousands of miles away and
right.
May never actually end up meeting them in person.
Mark, do you have any funny Mike stories that you can tell us?
Oh, I mean, just as I was chatting in the background, like there's no way we could have done this without Mike. That the breadth and depth of knowledge that Mike brought to the Star Wars material it was just invaluable. You know, like everybody in comics has their own area of expertise and their own knowledge base, but it's impossible for everybody to know everything. You know, like I have this sub niche of information that's locked in my brain just from growing up. But like without someone like Mike there to be able to help us, it wouldn't have been feasible. And like I said, like Marvel had and still has a library of books, but all of that other stuff, like when we got the license back, we had the original Marvel run in bound volumes, but we didn't have any of the Dark Horse material. It just didn't exist. We had to go buy them from, I think we bought them from Midtown Comics, to be honest, like, or David Gabriel sought out a retailer and was like, look, we need everything. We need every single, because that's, in order to proof it, you need to know, you need a printed copy of the book to be able to check it against. So like, but we couldn't have done any of that at all without Mike's research starting off all this. And the way that he deftly broke down all of the different categories of stuff into the different timelines, you know, like we had the easy part of actually just putting the books together. Mike had to figure it all out and then lay it out for us in advance of that. And he would prep everything. You know, he'd do the research, he'd get the documents together with all the recaps, the text things that he was showing off. The only thing that I had to do on the scroll was to take the text and make it go like this, so that it looked like that it was scrolling up the page.
Did you do the design work on that?
No. Well, once we got the initial template, I think we stole what Chris Eliopoulos was doing on the modern comic. He had figured out how to take the text and then modify it. So we like swiped that design page. And
yeah, because I know that we had to figure that out quickly, because I got the first one here, the first printing, where it's a different font.
Oh, is it?
On just the very first one. I think they fixed it in the reprints.
Okay.
Curtis, I don't know if your copy on top there is a first print or not.
It's first print. I think it is. Okay. Let me check. Oh yeah, no, it's a different font for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
But yeah, I think
we were timed like almost simultaneous with the start of the comic. I don't remember the exact date. Like the first book that came out once we got the license was the first Marvel Omnibus, the original year's one. I think that's the only series that I did the research on, because we had the comics on hand, you know, and I have an affinity for a love for that material as well. I kind of like snapped it away from Mike. It's like, no, this is mine, you know, the precious.
Well, I was happy to see how much you were able to include in the bonus features in those omnibuses, Mark.
Yeah,
so we're able to get the digital files from Dark Horse in time to include a lot of that stuff too.
Right, and also we had resources like Tom Palmer was an invaluable asset. He had photocopies of like everything. I know. Curtis, I had sent you a couple of things. One of the things Star Wars wise that Tom did was one of the original Marvel Years issues. Tom had painted the cover. I can't. Yeah, here we go. This is so the original cover.
Issue 81, right?
I can't remember the issue. That sounds right. He did the painting for the cover, but because it had a UPC box, he didn't bother painting that part of it. So whenever we'd go back and do these collections, we try to like complete the artwork. But I went to Tom. Tom had the original painting because he was a huge Star Wars fan, because his son, when his son was growing up, right as these movies came out, and like he was able to connect with his son. There's a great introduction that he wrote for one of the collections talking about that relationship. But Tom finished the painting. He took the original painting and completed the artwork for us, and then we were able to scan it and put it on the Ultimate Collection. And he was such a nice guy. Like out of the kindness of his heart, he made a high quality print of that cover for me and signed it like for Mark, thanks for, and that's one of my prized comic possessions, like that interpersonal relationship, having Tom there to provide those kinds of things. He would always find like original cover scans, photocopies of the stuff. He would bring it all in. He'd just be like, yeah, sure, here you go.
That's really cool that he did that. I noticed that he actually changed the hand a little bit on Leia there, that he improved it a little bit.
He was always kind of like tweaking things a bit there. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that initial one is probably the film from the original comic scan that's mocked up. And then that is like a much higher resolution scan of the painting.
Yeah, that reminds me of on Dark Empire. One of the changes that got made is that Leia is now different compared to the original comic. That George Lucas had requested this change for some reason, and now the original version of Dark Empire #1 with the other Leia, that's like one of the only pieces of artwork I haven't been able to include in these books. Like, I'm like, can we just crop out that little bit as a bonus feature? And I've been told no.
They don't want to show it.
He didn't like it?
George didn't like it. It was Leia.
Hold on, I gotta know what this looks like. Hold on a second.
Okay. Yeah, it was Leia with long hair, kind of like how she looked at the end of Return of the Jedi. But Carrie Fisher's likeness wasn't quite there. It's a different angle there too. So yeah, George just wanted.
I didn't even realize that was different. Where did mine go here? That's wild.
Yeah, so like most people haven't even noticed that. So if anyone's mad about that, sorry. Yeah, actually, Mark, one thing at the very, very start of this, I mean, we all had to hit the ground running to make this happen, obviously. Yeah. But man, if there was one thing I could have done differently, I wish that you guys had a chance to talk to me before making that digital files request to Dark Horse.
Well, it wasn't even a request. It was just like, give us everything. So we got an enormous file dump on. They sent us like an entire server's worth of stuff, and we just had to.
It still wasn't everything. That was what's amazing.
I know, of course. Well, I'm sure they lost stuff. Like,
we did send all the omnibus files, but those didn't include like all of the old trade paperback covers.
Right. Well, we would ask for certain things every once in a while, but we were kind of limited to like, we were only supposed to ask for certain things because it wasn't clearly losing the Star Wars license was not a beneficial thing for Dark Horse.
Right.
And so the relationship, like they were obligated legally to provide us these things, but it wasn't like they were happy to do so. So you kind of had to like pick your battles and get the stuff that was truly needed to complete the collections.
Right. Yeah, there's a few random things. I mean, there's some stuff that I'm sure Dark Horse forgot they ever printed in some random convention magazine or something.
Right. And there were concessions all around too with the Star Wars stuff, particularly with like the Marvel material. I remember we ended up using all of Dark Horse's files just out of time constraints and monetarily. Like we just couldn't afford. I have no doubt at some point Corey Settlemeyer will end up doing masterworks if they haven't started them of that material and going back to the original film and matching the coloring. You'll get your green Darth Vader, I guess we had it as green in the.
He and I have talked about that, and there's some stuff I can't say about that, but there's a reason why it hasn't happened yet. Is all I can say.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
And I know we're running out of time here, but Kurtis, I just wanted the people watching to know if you go to Amazon right now and look up Star Wars Epic Collection and sort by publication date, you're going to see some stuff now that I was told just a few days ago hadn't been announced yet. So this stuff is not in Diamond Previews yet, but there's listings on Amazon for it. So hopefully that means that these will be happening. but I'm seeing at least 4 listings for Star Wars Epics Volume 1's new printings.
Oh yes, yeah. Actually, I knew about those ones. Marvel is going to go to.
Me, Kurtis.
We got these a couple months ago.
Probably.
That has been one of the biggest questions: is why isn't Marvel reprinting the Star Wars stuff? But yeah, so I came prepared. It's these 4 volumes are going to be reprinted. Empire Volume 1, Old Republic Volume 1, New Republic Volume 1, and Rise of the Sith Volume 1. Those ones will be coming back to print, and I think we'll see the initiative of more of these volumes coming back to print, which is great. Well, Mike, that brings us to the end of our time. This has been really, really great. You've got so many stories. I might have to get you back to tell us some more at some point, because this was a lot of fun. And I'm glad you got to meet Mark. That's great.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd love to be on again. And Mark, it's been great getting to talk to you finally in person. Yep. So yeah.
Likewise.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Thanks. Okay, well, this brings us to our final guest of the show. This is Mark D. Beasley. What does the D stand for?
It's David. It's my dad's name. So my dad's Dave Beasley, and I'm Mark David Beasley. When I started in publishing, for whatever, it was just a nod to him, I guess. I always had my byline as Mark D. Beasley. So in all of my Marvel credits, it's Mark D. Beasley.
There you go. So you have a long history, or had a long history with Marvel. Can you tell us a little bit about when you got started with Marvel, and what brought you to? Let's not jump into the Epic collections quite yet, because there's some specific questions there. But yeah, what's your history?
So I had gone to school for archaeology and classical civilizations at Boston University, with the intention of being Indiana Jones. And then I kind of hit a roadblock and decided, like, academia is really not where I want to be for the rest of my life. And one of the things that had always brought me joy was reading comics. I had worked at a comic store through my teens, have always been a lifelong comics fan. And one of my friends who we were in a Barnes and Noble, and he was flipping through the internship Bible and saw that Marvel Comics had an internship program. And he said to me, "Mark, you should do this. That's perfect for you." And like kernel of an idea germinated, and I was able to finagle. I created an independent study course with my classics degree and convinced a professor that I would write a paper about the archetypal themes in comic books that were applicable to classics, like that superheroes were basically the modern mythology of today. Nice. And so he agreed to that, and I was able to. Internships at Marvel at the time were all unpaid. I convinced a friend of mine to allow me to crash on his floor. Basically, he was going to NYU at the time, another lifelong friend. And so the second semester of my senior year, I basically moved to New York. I finished up all my other coursework in advance of that, and then moved to New York for an internship. And I interned with Matt Idelson and Paul Tutrone. They were doing Deadpool, Captain America, and this is right at the start of the Heroes Return line, basically. And interning at Marvel was great. I made a lot of good friends. There weren't jobs when I first graduated. When my internship ended, and I kept ties there, but there was nothing working. There weren't any positions available. So flash forward a couple of years, and connections that I had made pointed me to David Bogart, who was the managing editor at the time, and he needed somebody to come on and help him out with the publishing plan of basically like the editorial database. It was more of an administrative position where I would keep track of schedules and handled freelancer payments and that kind of thing. But as I was able to come in, they would slowly seed editorial kinds of things, knowing that I wanted to be an editor or work on actual books. So one of the first projects I worked on was the Marvel Encyclopedia. And what else? And the Marvel Universe role-playing game at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So every once in a while, I would get these little projects, and they would give me things that I could work on while I was doing this whole other administrative type job. And then ultimately, like, they saw that I didn't want to be in that path and wanted to push me towards the trade paperback department with Jeff Youngquist. And eventually I transitioned completely, fully shifting over there to take on mostly the classic books. Corey Settlemeyer had been in the office, and then he shifted over to working with Axel Alonso for a brief period of time. And I kind of like filled in that gap. Jen Grunwald was doing the modern books. Jeff was supervising everything. So it was like a very threadbare organization, putting out a fair amount of books. And primarily what I was doing was like omnibus titles. I did the first Fantastic Four omnibus and the Essentials. So I started out doing all the essential books. One of the other big projects that kind of led to was the Stoker's Dracula project. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
It's the one that it was serialized back in the day, but never finished.
So at the time, Bill Jemas was very down on classic Marvel material. He was running the show, and he was all about the Ultimates and his new vision for modernizing comics. And the Ultimate books are great. Ultimate Spider-Man's one of my favorite titles. Bill felt that we should not be concentrating on historic material and didn't quite give classic stuff the due that it was, that everybody else felt it should deserved. So one month they solicited Essential Tomb of Dracula Volume 1. And Bill arbitrarily decided that he didn't want to publish that book, and he canceled it, even though it had been in the catalog. It was in the previous catalog. And then the orders from retailers came in, and they had surpassed the most recent Ultimate Spider-Man collection.
What?
So Bill had to kind of eat his words, and we put out that Essential Tomb of Dracula. And then that was a thing. I was like, I have an affinity for horror comics. One of my best friends he was always touting that series, and I wanted to like get it reprinted. So I did research for the whole run, basically, to try to figure out how to break it down into the next couple volumes. And in doing that, I discovered that unfinished adaptation, basically simultaneous with Tomb of Dracula, they launched these horror magazines in the 70s, one of which was Dracula Lives, where it was like small vignette stories of Dracula throughout history. And within that series, they started adapting, Roy Thomas and Dick Giordano started adapting the original Stoker novel. And they got through like 6 or 7 parts. I'm forgetting off the top of my head because it's been 20 years. But the magazine got canceled, and then they put another one in a different magazine, and then that magazine got canceled, and they never ended up finishing this thing. So as I was kind of like trying to dip my toes into more editorial things, I thought, hey, this would be a really cool coup to bring back these original creators and have them finish this project. And we could release, and at the time, Marvel was also working on these, it was Marvel Illustrated. They were adaptations of classic novels. So they did Last of the Mohicans, that Roy Thomas was also doing the writing for. So I positioned this as like, okay, these are guys who are not currently actively working on top tier Marvel books. I wouldn't be diverting resources from other things that will make us money. This is just like ancillary. Can I convince, if I can convince these people to come back, can we finish this in black and white. We can release it as a 4-issue miniseries. You can put it as a collection and sell it as part of this Marvel Illustrated line. And I was able to prove that this was a feasible thing and convince the powers that be to do it. And I got Roy and Dick signed on, and 30 years after the fact, we finished their adaptation of Dracula.
Wow. Well,
so that was one of the early things that I worked on. And then I fully shifted over into the trades department. This is like while I'm doing this other job of administratively like paying freelancers and sending out contracts to them. So it was always a mixed bag of like, how do I keep this creative outlet that is really fueling me, but also get all my work done that that Marvel wants me to be doing. And ultimately, I was able to shift over fully into the trades department and concentrated on that.
So from there, you worked with the Essentials, and that has it's sort of like the genesis of the Epic collection in a way, right?
Both those and the Premier Classic line of hardcovers were kind of like the precursors. So the Essentials, everybody really loved because they were huge. They had a big chunk of story and they were cheap. And the Premier Classics were an attempt to kind of model off of the Masterworks. But the problem with the Masterworks was that it was, you're starting, I think you've brought this up in the past, you're starting at the beginning of Marvel, basically. So like, if you're following in sequence, that doesn't give you the opportunity to tell the later stories that fans might want, or that these classic ones. So I don't remember whose actual kernel of an idea, probably David Gabriel's, was to create this, but we modeled after the Premier Classics, after the Masterworks, as being a line of numbered title releases that if you were a fan and wanted to buy every single one, they had a number. It was sequential. But you could also simultaneously just buy a version where it didn't have the number and it was a self-contained story of, like the ones that we put out were Kraven's Last Hunt or Avengers Defenders War, stuff like that, that ultimately did get collected in Masterworks or other trades. But that was the means of like proving that there was a demand for this classic material and that fans would pay a fair amount for it. That all came in conjunction then, and the Essentials was like the cheap end of it. So that's going on, and then simultaneously we had this push for the MDCU, the Marvel Digital Comics Unlimited, which was the digitization of basically all of the big titles to put online so that people would have a pay service like Netflix. And so that that push to the mandate there was, we're going to do every issue of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, every issue of Uncanny X-Men, every issue of Iron Man, all the biggest Marvel titles. We want to have those be available at the start. And so I was, as part of my role, I was helping coordinate the digitization of all that material, particularly the later stuff. Corey Settlemeyer, who's the Masterworks editor, he's a freelance editor. He primarily handles the earliest of Marvel things because he has such a wealth of knowledge of the material and the processes of restoring it. He's really, top notch with that. So Corey was like handling the early aspect, and then it would hit a certain point and I would pick up from there and go to, like up to modern day stuff, materials. And so we were digitizing all of that. And then suddenly we had this vast depth of material and saw that there was a call for it. But the initial step of that MDCU kind of, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but Marvel hit a financial bump and it wasn't well received as much as it ultimately is now. And so Marvel went through a series of layoffs and most of our staff for that project got cut, and it just fell by the wayside for a while. Then other stuff financially started happening, that we got bought out by Disney, and then there was a resurgence with that idea of putting the stuff, making it all available. So all that kind of like came together, along with the concept of I think David Gabriel probably was like, okay, well, we've been doing these essentials, but we're getting to the point where, like, particularly with like Wolverine, we were reprinting stuff from the 2000s and having to convert it from color to black and white in order to put it out in the format. And the Premiere Classics, it was, they were doing well enough, but it seemed like fans wanted a melding of the two, where it was not quite the Masterworks, but or Premiere Classics, where it's a high-end hardcover, but something in between that gives you a huge chunk of story and allows fans to really dive into the material. So like all of that converged together at the same time for the debut of the Epic line.
That's amazing. Yeah. And how was it received by retailers at the start?
To be honest, like I didn't really have much interaction with retailers. Everything was filtered through David Gabriel. But okay. I mean, initially the plan was to start off with, I think you said there's 6 releases in the first year.
Yeah. And so we had, let me pull up, you have it as your background, but I'll bring it to
the ad. I found that.
There's this one. These 4 were the initial 4 releases plus
okay, so
Captain America, Dawn's Early Light, right, and Fantastic Four, All in the Family. Those were the first 6, and then they kind of did that in a cycle. And then quickly after that, Daredevil was added to the list.
Well, so what happened, clearly, it started, the intention was we were going to do 18. I don't remember the exact split, how, like, if Corey was going to do, 6 and I was going to do 12, or Corey was going to do 12 and I was going to do 6, but there were supposed to be 18 slots. And so that rapidly increased to like 30 something within a year or two, because the response was so positive, and either that or because of the material that we had available to us, it was somewhat easy to slot in an Epic, because we had so much of the material digitized by that point that we just had to put it into, research it real quick. We had the grand research. We know what's going into it. We just have to take those files, make, paginate it, do the design. So you could take something like the, some of the early Epics were like 2 Premiere Classics crammed together into one book.
Right.
Marvel is legendary for repurposing previously reprinted material in a new fashion, new format. So if there are easy way, but with these initial ones, the intent, I think, was to show to fans, okay, you've gotten all this stuff before. Here's something that we've never reprinted, and it's continuing right after something that we just put out. So like a lot of these books, I think you actually reminded me of this. I had forgotten. We put out these big omnibus volumes, and then this new format suddenly comes out, and it's like, hey, you bought that omnibus. Here's the next issue. Here, you want to keep reading the story. Here's this much cheaper volume of the next, and you can just keep reading. So it was kind of like
at the time, the Omnis were also a new format.
Right.
And so not everything was going to be an omnibus. You weren't going to get a Tom DeFalco Thor omnibus.
It was kind of haphazard with that. It was you would have stuff that sort of was like, here's 3 Masterworks slapped together, or here's a hugely influential run on a comic that came, so like the Romita or Michelini Leighton Romita Iron Man, that's a hugely influential, clearly, Demon in a Bottle. affected all of Iron Man for decades, and so that's something that fans are responsive to, or like the FF Byrne or Thor Simonson, those kinds of ones, like those could exist as standalone collections to an extent, independent of like starting from the beginning of the series.
So I remember when the Daredevil Epic collection was first solicited, it was actually just a straight up Fall from Grace
Right.
collection. It wasn't an Epic collection, but at
Right.
some point somebody decided to make it an Epic collection.
That's the kind of thing where, like, I think that's evidence of the success and fan response to that we had decided, oh, okay, we'll do a new printing of this book that's been out of print for a decade plus, but fans were responding so well to the epics, and clearly that's like a giant chunk of story that you're not going to like break it up in the middle of the book if you're plotting out the Daredevil epic line. Like, I don't think we initially even planned for a Daredevil inclusion in the epics. That was the thing where, like, we saw the fan response to the epics. We have this book planned. Oh no, now we have to figure out the breakdown for every single volume of this series.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden we have a 20 volume commitment.
Right. But that's the thing. At the time, you didn't. Sure, the eventual goal is to reprint all of that, but you're only really putting out one book. It just happens to be now branded Epic so that it fits nice on your shelf, and you can put it next to all the other ones that look pretty.
Right. Okay, so you sent me, you told me a little bit of a story, and I want to share this because it's just kind of funny, about the font change. Because I definitely noticed this font change. It wasn't too far into the line. Only like maybe the first couple of dozen Epic collections have this font, which I flipped this around. So in the Epic collection title at the top one is the original font, and then the bottom one is the new current font. And then on the spine that you see, I should have put them the other way around, but the bottom one is the original font, and the top one above that is the new current font. And you can mostly see it in the letter C, because it doesn't curve around all the way.
Exactly, yeah.
But also the M is up straight.
Mm-hmm.
But also the font further down with the titles, the Superior Stratagem and Captain America Lives Again. That's also a different font too. Yeah. So tell me, why did that happen?
So, the Marvel legal department at some point notified everybody that we needed to make sure that we were using fonts that were in Marvel's approved font server. So prior to that, things were kind of loosey-goosey, and like designers would just grab a font, and whether or not they had, we were trusting them that they had paid the license to use that font for the design. But font licenses were a thing at Marvel that, we had paid for a certain number of uses of a particular font. And if we strayed outside of that or used fonts that weren't approved, it could become problematic legally. And I think this was something that was happening not just within Marvel, but, like kind of worldwide, as far as companies that make money off of this thing suing people for misusing their fonts. So at some point we had an approved list of fonts. These are the fonts that we have. This is our font server. And unfortunately, we had advocated that Marvel buy these particular ones, which I wish I had some kind of documentation as to what they actually are. I don't have that piece of paper anymore, but like we didn't spend the money. Marvel didn't want to pay up to be able to get these particular fonts. So our designer had to the best of his ability, find complementary ones that wouldn't look too drastically different, because clearly, like, one of the appeals of this line of books is that they are uniform in how they lay out, how the spines look. You want them to match. You don't want them shifting too much. And And so I think Rodolfo, the designer who did the original design and also this redesign, he's a fantastic designer, came up with something that, like, you said you had noticed, but was it something that was glaring to you from the onset?
Oh, no, not glaring. It's just what, as I was looking one day, I was like, wait a minute, that's
those
something
are different.
different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
No,
so
it was very close.
At one point on my desk, I had a sheet of paper, a handwritten note. Whenever we would go back to press on one of the old ones, we'd have to manually convert. Like in InDesign, we would have to change each page, make sure that we were converting the covers, converting the interior design to the new approved fonts.
Wow. Amazing. And so, sorry, what's the designer's name again?
Rodolfo Muraguchi. He's credited.
Okay.
He should be in the. I'm pretty sure he's in there.
Let's have a look.
Book designer. He's usually like right above David Gabriel's name there, or at least in the ones I have at hand.
Right. Okay, that's so. And he's the guy who
did
all of this trade dress, the spine.
That was a lengthy process coming up with.
I'm sure.
Trying to find something that could apply all across the line. It had some kind of distinctions with the color coding. Like, there was so much thought put into all the different things. You know, Spider-Man, he's red, but his drop shadow is white. And then the X-Men, they're blue, but the drop shadow is yellow. And then every time you'd add in a new one, you'd have to come up with what the color was, or you know, what's the color of the drop shadow? How does it work? Is it too close to this other one? And, you know, like, we got to hold this color. Silver Surfer, you know, he's going to be gray, but you got to do it this way. And then we would play around with different things, like the Black Widow one. It's inverted so that I think the front of the typeface is black, right? So only the drop shadow is red.
Do I have I think I had a Black Widow around here somewhere. Oh, Carnage does the same thing.
Yeah. So it's like the absence of a color, basically, only delineated by the outline.
And then also trying to find something that wasn't going to feel out of date in 10 years from now. I feel like the Essentials went through a couple of different brand redesigns, and they kind of got dated after a little while, pretty quick.
Right. I think Rodolfo ultimately ended up doing the final. The Comicraft who did the initial ones? There were, like, I think you've shown pictures. There's the initial one had the vertical bar, and it was I can't even remember who would have put that. It was probably somebody in house. Then they went to Comicraft for a while in the second or third iteration. Then when the design came back in house, by the time I was coming on, we changed it up again. And I think the ultimate one that we settled on for the third edition of the Essentials, I think Rodolfo might have done that design. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think I have an Essential anymore. I had to cull a bunch of my collection when we moved.
Well, I only have the Godzilla one left.
Right.
Because these.
Oh man,
these were.
I fought for that book. I wanted to put that out so bad. Oh yeah, that was. I was the impetus behind producing that book, because I knew what was the film that came out.
Probably the Matthew Broderick one.
No, it was like.
No, it was after that.
Yeah. Shoot, it wasn't Godzilla 2000. There was a new Godzilla movie was coming out. Whatever the I can't remember what book, what like, I saw an announcement on probably a Newsarama at the time or whatever. New Godzilla movie. And I was like, we should get the license back. Nobody's going to do anything with this material. Let's one and done. We'll bang out an Essential and fans will eat it up. And I convinced David Gabriel that we should do it. Because when else are you getting the same thing with, like, Master of Kung Fu? Like, you got one shot at that to get it out before somebody's going to start caring about it. And that was just prior to, like, people really caring about IP the way that they do presently, you know?
Yeah, right.
That would
Wow.
never fly now. It would be too cost prohibitive.
No kidding.
And some of those things, it was also a way to like, well, if we don't do this, it's like the Doc Savage issues of 2-in-1 and Team Up.
Yeah.
Where like, if you're just never going to be able to reprint those otherwise, you know.
It's true. Wow. Okay, so what are some of the more interesting epics that you worked on in terms of having to like find material, or you came up with complications with the files?
The let's see, I dug through the ones that I've kept. One of my favorites is Craven's Last. Oh shoot, my thing's not showing. Craven's Last Hunt, which I've reprinted probably more than any other human being on the planet. I have done that book so many times between Premier Classic, between trade paperback, but different versions of trade. I did probably like 3 versions of that trade. And then finally this particular one, which is the first instance of us reprinting it with the original coloring. Because I love the graphic novel presentation of it with where they did the blue line color. It's gorgeous, you know, but it's a unique thing in that line that that the Epic is the only place so far. I mean, I imagine when it gets there in the Masterworks that it will match the original coloring, but to this point, it had not been ever reprinted with the original colors, and having the full covers with the trade. We probably put the full covers in the other collections, but like the original reprint, that they had removed all the trade dress and made it more like chapters of a book. But this one, it's like, here, this is what the comic looks like. And after the fact, they did these things to it that made it, you know, even more amazing, and it looks gorgeous. But if you want to read it like you did originally, this is the only place to do that.
Yeah.
And
I'm always a fan. I'm always a fan of experiencing it as close to the original way as possible. And so
right.
that's
Yeah.
I was thrilled to see that was the case when that Epic came out.
Another one, which is I'm particularly fond of, no, you're not gonna be able to see. Oh, there we go. Man Without a Country. This is the Wade Garney, the original Wade Garney run on Captain America, which had been reprinted a number of different times, but every prior instance, we always had some problem missing digital files for an issue. So we would have to run. I think I went a deep dive into some of your videos the other day, just and seeing you explain ketones, the moire pattern that would show up in the copy dot book. So when Marvel's reproducing stuff from the 90s in film form, they started using black in the coloring to give it more variations in color. You know, like the traditional 4-color printing, it's different levels of CM and Y, cyan, yellow, and magenta, and then the line art is black. But they didn't tend to put black in the actual colors. When you start doing that, the copy dot process, where they take the film and they basically like take the 4 plates and slap them together, there's a digital process called descreening, where it blends the color dots together to make a solid thing. And that gets really messed up when there's black in the color, because it takes those dots and makes a weird pattern. So almost all, you know, there would always be at least one issue where we didn't have the digital files. And I scoured through binders of CDs that they had sent to the printers to originally print the books. Digital archives that, like, it would early digital comics were an insane asylum of sending things out, and they're not archived, or the discs would get scratched and then you couldn't pull things off of them. Right. We managed to get every single issue, and I think there's one cover that I couldn't source the original digital file, but the rest of the at least the Wade Garney run of that is all from the original digital files. So that was one that felt like like poor Mark Wade. He always had these things happen to his books. There would always be some misprint in his big collections, and we did we did an omnibus of the run when they came back, the Heroes Return stuff, and there's one page where the lettering is missing, and inevitably Mark will open a book, flip right to the page that has the problem with it. It's like, I thought I finally had gotten something perfect for him, and the lettering file dropped out in that thing. It drives me nuts. So this particular one, we got everything as best as to our ability.
Well done. Wow. That's a great story. Yeah, that early day of digital coloring is just I do some work with for Better or for Worse comic strip, and the same thing is like because she did the comic strip from 1978 to 2008. So she jumped on board with digital stuff right when everybody else did in the 90s.
Yeah.
But those files from like 1993 to 1997 or something like that are just like, nobody knew how to save things properly at the time. There was no standard for anything.
Well, at Marvel, it was a size factor, because the way that they would, I don't know if this same thing that you encounter the same thing. Those early digital files, you couldn't have a flattened TIFF with the color because the file would be too big. So the way they
saving on these little floppy disks,
they would either that or they would burn it to CD.
Yeah.
So you have your high resolution line art, which was either like 600 or higher, and then the color doesn't actually print at that resolution. So they would have 72 DPI color files separated behind it. So you'd have your line art, which was slapped together in Quark with a color file. And then any instance where you had a color hold, where the say Cyclops is shooting a beam, you want that to be crisp, but the colors are only at 72 DPI. So you would have to isolate. You'd have to isolate that little piece and do that as a separate like layer in Quark at the time.
Right.
And so like you would get to the Heroes Reborn or Heroes Return Avengers stuff, where there's George Perez is drawing 500 characters on a page. Everybody's shooting laser blasts. It's just like insanity putting that all together and making sure that it stays. The Avengers Assemble, those hardcovers, that was another one. There's one issue that I for many, many years, we had like absolutely no source. There was no film. It was scanned from a printed copy of a book.
Yeah.
It's like Avengers 12, maybe. It's a Scarlet Witch issue where she's going crazy. And I think we finally were able to get us, if not like every single page, all but like 3 or 4. And that was an instance where there was a scratch on the CD and you couldn't pull the files off of them.
Wow.
So like, this is the only source of this file. And it's on a scratch CD because somebody put it in a binder and haphazardly, or it got scuffed.
Oh, wow. Okay, so were you ever were you part of the conversations to come up with which volumes were going to come up next?
Yeah, well, we would talk about that. That was kind of the thing where I was hinting at, where Corey would sort of have a certain set number of books, and we would have a certain set number of books, and it was always like we had to vie for what titles would get picked. Like if Corey wanted to do an X-Men title, then you didn't want to do like, and we only had 18 slots, you didn't want to do 2 or 3 X-Men titles. But then we're also complicated by the fact that we're sort of trying to piggyback off of like publishing initiatives or films that are coming out at the same time. You know, so it would be like, oh, you're doing the X-Men book, we can't do that. And excuse me, Corey was always hesitant to add new branches in the line. because understandably so, because the more that you put in, you suddenly introduce a Power Man and Iron Fist book, then that means you don't get to do a Fantastic Four book that year. Like it was always trying to juggle the pieces to make sure everything fit. And I would make suggestions as we were researching for the year. I'd make suggestions for books that I particularly wanted to do, or, like we would kind of take a look and say, oh, okay, well, let's try to fill in the gaps. We've done volume 20, but then we don't have anything reprinted until volume 25. Let's do 23, like that kind of a thing. Or sometimes it was as haphazard as that, as far as.
And what was your priority? You personally, like what would you be pushing for?
I always was advocating for New Mutants, Excalibur. Moon Knight was one that I wanted to add in because I wanted to reprint that stuff in color. And we had done some of the things in Premier Classic, but then the Premier Classic line ended, so we didn't get to finish the whole Sienkiewicz run in that, if I remember correctly. We might have, but I mean, it was like, I wanted those in big, thick volumes that, so Moon Knight was definitely one. I'm trying to think. For the Star Wars stuff, I was always waiting for to get to Dark Empire. And as much as I loved Mike's planning for it, it was a pain that it was volume 4 or 5. And I'm like, I don't want to wait for this book anymore.
Oh, nice. Well, we've kind of gone over time here. I appreciate you talking to us. We might have to have a bigger conversation about this at another time, because this is I'm fascinated by the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
And I hope that all of you who are listening and watching are also interested in this too. But yeah, thanks, Mark, for being a guest on this celebration 10 years later, 10 years after this all started. It's amazing to see that it's still going strong.
Yeah, I see somebody has a little comment. I had surgery on my elbow, which is why I'm all bandaged up. So the splint's supposed to come off on Thursday.
There you go. Nice. Perfect. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I hope that you all had a great time with all of these special guests. I know that I certainly did. Thank you for all your comments. If you haven't subscribed already, of course, you got to subscribe. And otherwise, Mark, is there anything you want to plug? Any website or anything like that?
I'm trying to think. Well, right now, I am currently working as a brand writer for Hasbro. So I am the person behind the scenes for G.I. Joe and Beyblade. And I can just announce today that I was hired on full time, which I've been freelancing there for several years, but I am now officially a Hasbro employee. So that's exciting news for me today.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I've been working on is I did wrote the campaigns for, I don't know what kind of overlap you have with toys, but G.I. Joe was one of the things that G.I. Joe got me into comics. Like my love of G.I. Joe the cartoon as a kid led to me seeking out the comic books, which then led me to Spider-Man, X-Men, all the Marvel line. And that's what got me into being an editor at Marvel. So it's like I've come back full circle to that early childhood thing. And I wrote the campaigns for the Hiss Tank and Dragonfly HasLabs, the big classified series releases of those, the 6-inch scale helicopter and tank.
Cool. Wow. Okay. I think we'll definitely book another time where we can chat further. But yeah, we're going to sign off today, and I'm going to leave all of you with my theme song. So thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.